I don't know where to look.
You can look everywhere. You can look at Jeff.
If you have to.
Yeah, you can look at Pat.
Yeah. And then everyone thinks I'm sat on an umpire chair.
We'll just look up there from there.
Everyone's always shocked.
Continue down there, boys.
Everyone's shocked when they meet you, Pat, because they think you're 6'9".
Yeah.
The whole video, people talking to you about
I love how we sidetracked already.
Yeah.
So you're a man of many talents. You have a channel. You have a company, Element Games.
Yeah.
You also Artis Opus is your baby as well.
Yeah. So everything I do has been shared with Greg, who's kind of silently behind the scenes being smarter than I am. But yeah. So he started Element, I think it's 11 years ago now. That was my first thing in the hobby that was like a business. But I was commission painter before that as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Was like, where did you start?
I cut my teeth in the hardest of ways.
I was going to say, is this where all the dry brushing came from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Smashing.
Yeah, just ruthless, soulless efficiency, actually.
God, I wish I had that when it came to painting.
So we were at the expo and you kindly tutored me in some dry brushing techniques.
Yeah.
I've taken some of those on board and I've been using them.
You'd been doing some of them already, actually, which was kind of, I've got a board down there, which is kind of like some of the things we spoke about you had been doing but hadn't necessarily
thought about it.
Yeah.
It was interesting because my mate Steve, he's quite a big painter. He's been doing it for years and I'd say a very good painter, and he was like learning lots from it. But from my point of view, I've been doing dry brushing for years. I think it is one of the best ways to paint. I used to hear it so often that it's like, it's just a rubbish way of painting.
Start with this.
Yeah, it's a basic. And when
use
you,
it for your bases.
Yeah, that's it, bases
my soul,
and
my soul,
scenery.
my soul, yeah.
But I always used to find it really weird. Like, it was really hard to describe in words until you showed someone how to do it. So if it's hard to describe in words, it's not that basic, but it is really, really useful.
Yeah, you let the model paint itself via your brush that has some paint on it is probably the
thing that baffles
or like
me.
relief painting, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'd say so. Yeah, because I mean that's that I guess the
everything belittles it though, doesn't it? Because you could say layering, you're like, well, just putting paint on top of it, but layering can look beautiful. Like anything can look beautiful. It's just
washing can look beautiful.
Yeah, it really can.
I really pulled it on, and I do trigger some of our viewers when I do that.
Oh yeah.
I pull it on more just for
to the point where you do it on purpose. And the
like not drilling my barrels.
Yeah, and then in the VO you're like really slather it on, drown it.
No oil.
Yeah.
Just one day I'm just going to actually just dunk it into a pot and pull it out again.
I did that on an April Fool's video actually.
That sounds like the best way to paint a model with it.
It's surprisingly less bad than you think as long as you have somewhere to shake it.
Yeah. Like the old dipping technique.
Really. That's how I learned to paint, which probably describes a lot about why I paint now. Actually, yeah.
So when we were at Expo, you taught us through some stuff. A very interesting little technique where you do 45-degree angles, which I'm sure you'll go into. But the thing I found really fascinating was how you made dry brushing look like airbrushing. And it still baffles me. And I still get a bit of chalkiness every now and again when I do my stuff, but I know that what I'm doing it for tends to be like for a texture. You want smoothness. I add a bit of moisture into it, and sometimes a bit of hit and miss. But you've got a very interesting method that stops it being hit and miss.
Yeah, it's just everything is, because I could just lick my brush now and do the same thing, right? But it's much harder to digest things without numbers attached, and this is why you'll get exactly what's that ratio, and you're like, the ratio does not matter. Put it in the right place. But at least a stepping on point for a lot of things makes a difference. So we have a little sponge called the dampening pad.
Yes.
Catchy name.
I love it.
We got to a point like, shit, we need to name this. What do we call it? That's what it's called, because otherwise what are you going to call it? Like squishy pot? I don't know.
Squishy pot.
Did you have to have a meeting about what it was going to be called?
I always get post office flashbacks whenever I look at
yeah,
for the
exactly the same reason. So you take the brush that you're using, and that that's bigger or smaller, and you put up to 3 brushes for cleaning. 3 drops off the back of your brush for cleaning. I need to dip into my tea now to do this, don't I? Up to 2 for kind of base coat work, and then up to 1 for just working normally, and that releases a tiny bit of water into the paint. Because it's difficult to not get really like blunt about this now, but the paint is made to be diluted, right? It's only when people pick up a dry brush they forget everything they've learnt about airbrushing, about dry brushing, about layering, or anything like that, and they're using a paint, like Duncan called it 2 thin coats. Like, it is meant to be diluted.
Yeah.
So why on earth, the moment you hold this brush, do you forget everything? Like, absolutely everything that is a fundamental about how to get that paint to behave well. And no one's like, yeah, put it on neat, mate. off your pop.
Yeah.
Right. It's
yeah.
just it's going to lead to bad things. So yeah, that was the introduction of that. That's why it comes via the pot.
Yeah, the using the back of the brush was a really clever way of organising the ratio of how much moisture you need to have. Because I always used to say, like, when I was at seminars, I was like, I always had a bit of moisture. I'd have like a little wet patch on me tissue.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on the phone, where actually, weirdly, I used to have a piece of wood, and for years I've just started using tissue paper. And I have a little bit of a moist area, and I'd dry brush it. And like I was doing skeletons, you get nice smooth,
things are just go better.
And they're always like, oh, but when I do it, it's really chockers. Like, that's because you expect instant results on the first pass. You've got to build it up. It's like,
again, that's something that, you know, like, oh, well, my dry brushing didn't look good in half a second flat, so why is it not perfect now? Well, like, where does all of this stuff come from? And it's just its own bespoke set of rules, which is almost like miniature painting in general, where they're like, oh, you're going to use a wooden palette, are you? That's very modern. No, it's about 5,000 years old or more, right?
So, the old artist there with the wooden palette.
Like if you put in paint on like WhatsApp or anything, a brush comes up and a palette comes up. That's not a new idea either.
No.
But we just love forgetting rules and then putting things in their own little box. And
yeah. I got told off for using the word fascinating because apparently, as a British person, it sounds really sarcastic. But I
fascinating.
Really, really draw it out.
Yeah,
fascinating, or extremely camp. But they're basically the same thing.
But I found it very interesting from say, like, from chatting to you before or what have you, is that, say, like, everything you said about dry brushing, like I don't think I've ever diluted paint when I've dry brushed or anything like that. And then seeing like what you've done with Artis Opus and the products you sell and how you demonstrate it, and I'm sort of like, wow, that's a really like new way of doing it. But actually, you've just gone backwards.
It's new to you now.
Yes.
But it's like let's say the comparison I draw is like, let's say you learn to drive on private land in like a tractor, right? And then you get into your first proper driving lesson ever on a road, and you just do exactly what you've been doing. Yeah, it's probably not a good idea. So actually, teaching someone who had never driven at that point for road driving might go a bit better than the person who's been driving for 10 years, just like around there with no rules or whatever.
You have that interference.
So you have to unlearn before you start again. And actually, if someone sits down with their partner who's never painted but they have used makeup, then there's a really good chance that they're going to pick it up faster than the person who's painted, because you're not fighting all these things that it's not anyone's fault they learnt the way they did. You're doing your first base, use this flat brush, only go in one direction, and put loads on and then take loads off, rather than putting less on and taking less off, which again is complete. The moment you say it, you're like, oh, sure, like that kind of makes sense.
That's interesting, because I recently, in the last 4 years, learned to drive a car. I've been riding motorcycles for decades, and I never needed a car, because I was always like, just get my motorcycle, because I was at college and uni. It made no sense to get a car then, and then we had a child, and I was like, I should probably learn to drive. And it took me longer to learn to drive a car, because initially, I was looking like I would as a motorcyclist. I'm always looking quite far ahead. And the instructor's like, why are you looking that far ahead? Look closer. There's all these things I need you to be aware of that are close. I'm just like, oh, okay. So it was really hard to unlearn that. And then obviously the mechanics, even though it's a motorised vehicle, everything was different.
Everything's really far away from you in a car.
Yeah, I'm just like that. I'm just
where's all my stuff?
The things that I do in my feet in a car, I do in my hands. To a certain point, and the things I use my hands for, I'd use my feet for, which is like really. So everything's a bit like.
I really struggled when I was a teenager. One of my mates who had like a motorbike was like, "Oh, just get on it and drive around this car park in like a village hall in the middle of nowhere."
I know where this is going.
Well, I didn't crash it, but I did. I'm so used to riding a push bike, and then one of the brake handles being the clutch. I was just like, my whole life is a lie. Get me off this thing.
My very first driving lesson, he's like, they get you to turn left straight away in the UK at least, because it's easy. You're not crossing across someone. So it's like, oh, this one does left. He's like, okay, now turn right. And I just that's not an indicator on that side. No. Suddenly, the windscreen wipers are going backwards and forwards.
I still get even now, because I get the indicators now, because obviously where you turn and stuff makes sense for the wheel. But I'm just like, when it gets to night, I'm like, which one's the headlight? Which one's the flash one wants to come out? I want to flash them, but I might just put the hazards on or something like that. So I always get panicked, and Liz is like, you should go in the car more and, do some more journeys, get used to it. I was like, that's fine, I will.
It's a good indication of how, like, taking on, once you've learned something in your head the original way, whether that's right or wrong, or however you want to put it, it is pretty hard to kind of, you've just got to regularly like go down the path again and again and again and again until something just stops being your default.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because I definitely every lunchtime, every Thursday lunchtime, I was doing these driving lessons. And it was the same kind of route pretty much, but that repetitive behaviour definitely helped a lot.
Your home course,
which obviously works with painting.
Yeah, it
it's
does.
very similar. Yeah, it's interesting. It was just like the things that I guess there's a lot of stuff that I probably didn't do as well. So again, it's not very visual the way we're talking about it, but you would like draw like lines of paint from the dropper bottles.
That's my wood.
Yeah, that's it.
Hello, I've brought my wood.
Which is wood.
So you can see there's literally a washboard down there.
It's amazing.
And that's
Clean
which
your
I use
clothes
as a washboard for my brushes specifically. I've only got one pair. But yeah, so that they're all drawn in lines, and then to avoid taking too much, rather than having like this great big splob of paint, and just don't use your dry brushes like a spoon. Like please, no one ever, like whatever they are, don't use them like a spoon. They're not made for that. Just sneak it off the edge of it, and you draw it to the side, and then you make a little circle there, and you'll have the right amount on the very end of the bristles, which is like, you should only be doing stuff with the end of your bristles with a dry brush. The middle of the brush doesn't have a purpose. That's there for in like 2 years' time when you've worn down to it. It has no function whatsoever apart from giving them the spring that they want. So like the top 2 to 3 mil of your bristles, that is where the paint should, there and only there is where the paint should go a little bit and remove a little bit and then go to your model. Whereas, you know, like just which was again the April Fool's video. I think the moment we put that out, quite a few, because we said like, look, if this is what you're doing, we're saying maybe question it. And so many people are like, actually, I hadn't thought about it like that. But no, it's not a spoon.
It was so I used to really brush, I guess, upkeep of your brushes and stuff. I'd just stick them in, wash them, clean them, wipe them all off, give them a bit of a dry. Sometimes use the old hair dryer, give them a bit of a dry, which might be terrible.
It probably is.
They lasted well, weirdly. But yeah, just not using any water, you know, dipping your dry brush into a pot of water.
There's just no
and you're
need.
saying it just goes into the ferrules and it takes that liquid into the ferrules, which then damages your brush. Ever since having that little chat and sit down, I've not washed my brushes the same way.
Are they going okay?
Oh yeah, great,
yeah.
Absolutely. I've got the little dampener pad as well, so I've been using that a lot. I thought, so I was saying to you on the phone that I used to have an old piece of wood that was from my brother's snooker table. I used to use that all the time for dry brush, and I realised I still have that. It's what my PC's on.
You can frame it.
It's just like a little tray that I just slide out. I was like, that's because I had to get a graphics card because we were doing some streaming recently, and my old graphics, even though it can play lots of games, just wouldn't stream. It's just like, no, because the drivers aren't updated. So I got a new one, I pulled it out, I was like, there's the wooden thing I used to use.
You can prime it, rechristen it.
Exactly, yeah. So it's about that kind of size, so it's quite a decent size.
A big place that you can make as messy as you want that isn't the actual desk itself, ideally. That is such a really brilliant tool for painting as well, because if testing has no consequence and is as convenient as possible, you'll do it. If there is any tiny barrier to entry to testing something, you just won't bother. Yeah. So, or, you know, making mistakes on your palette, that's a great place to make them. But if let's say you've got a washout. Yeah. Kilos of wash, however much wash you want, and you've got some silver bits here and some gold bits here and some other bits there, you can quickly dry brush them and then test your wash over that and that and that, and that is exactly how it'll be on the model. But there wasn't a consequence to that going wrong. Yeah. And especially for various reasons, that's how everything should be if you're trying to be creative. Yeah, yeah. I think so. That big, you know, the big wide space.
What do you think of these? I've seen it's become a bit of a fad, isn't it now? Of people just gluing bits of models to a piece of board now and using that as a way of getting their dry brush right. Have you seen this?
It's an utter waste of time. So
controversial. Bits of marine, you know, like the way marine bikes are in halves and just loads of people just gluing loads of stuff to a piece of board.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like bits of I've seen it where somebody might put bits of scenery and bits and bobs, sprayed it black, and then they dry brush it. Yeah,
it's not controversial if you wanted to paint like a cool thing in a frame and have that be the thing. But you've got models for painting like models. Yeah. So like you can't put your paint there in a practical way. Yeah. It'll be a dust magnet. So ours is like there is some detail, and then I'll add on more detail, actually proportionally a lot more, just by paint and use some repriming, and there'll be like a bit of flock on there and PVA and stuff. But it's not like obnoxiously 3D.
Yeah.
Because at that point you're gonna start doing stuff to your brushes, and your quality of your paint job, a lot of it's to do with dust as well. But you want to be able to clean in a way that isn't going to kill the brushes.
Yeah.
And the more 3D something is, especially if it gets Kates and Kates and Kates, it's the opposite of what you need, basically, because it'll get more and more porous as the edges pick up more and more paint.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using slightly matte paints in like 4 sessions, that's going to be detrimental to your painting.
Ooh.
So you'd be better, I'm not saying this to try and sell my own stuff, you'd be better to take a piece of plastic card, like an A4 piece or a piece of wood or anything like that, and then just like prime it and start mixing up paint aggressively on it and just wait for that to build up. If you were going to do it.
That's very interesting. So only a controversial take if you're uneducated. Was what I took from that.
So it's like anything, right? If you've had brilliant painters on here, and the way that Richard Gray would look at something and be like, how do I make that look like the thing, is to stop, slow down, and think really carefully from like stage one, what is the purpose? What am I? Oh, it needs to look like this bit is bouncing off that or whatever. And that, in theory, that's what's holding all of us back from becoming that good, as well as, like 15 years of hardcore practice. But it's just considering what the purpose is that you're trying to get out of it, the properties of the material that you're using as well. And people don't think about the paint properties for the paint that they're dry brushing with either, even though they do for normal painting, matte, satin, gloss.
Yeah.
It's not part of anyone's thought process.
No,
for dry brushing.
I'd never thought of that ever. So how would that affect your dry brushing? What's like dry brushing with a matte paint like?
Okay, so I can give you a really good analogy. If you think about your primer as the first layer, if I gave you like a house brush covered in emulsion, which is how we should all think of our painting, obviously, and I gave you like
That's what mine looks like, to be fair.
and I gave you I've got a super good texture palette for you, and I gave you a fluffy bathrobe and a piece of glass, and I said stroke one of those and stroke one of those. You get streaks down one. That's gloss. Like this is like a magnified version of it. That's gloss. You get streaky. It wouldn't want to adhere to it particularly easy. And I gave you the bathrobe. All the little fluffy bits that stuck out, you'd instantly have dried paint on. So that is a matte primer and a gloss primer, which is why I tend to just use Chaos Black as default for everything satin that's in the middle. I get the best of both worlds. And I also start off primarily, people might notice that I don't start off using matte paints in my painting process. They come in towards the end, almost always actually, with dry brushing this is. But I start off with GW because most of it's satin. I'll avoid a few like McCrag Blue, which for an unknown reason is the most matte paint by far in the range. Completely different properties to basically any other paint I can think of that's not like towards the end of the value spectrum, like a white or something.
Corvus Black's quite matte as well, isn't it, if I remember rightly? Because that's like a really dark grey, but I never really thought about it like that.
So every now and again, if you've had a paint job that has gone awry with dry brushing and you don't know why, it's very possibly because you just used a matte paint and you didn't think about.
Oh, that's
you didn't
very
get any worse. You just and you can do it with the matte paints. It's just you have to be that bit more careful and cautious with your steps.
Yeah, that's because we use a lot of AK on the channel, and they're very matte.
The 3rd gen, they are quite matte.
Brilliant
paint.
Yeah, but they sent us some of the dual XO paints, which they specifically say are satin. So that might be an interesting one to try.
Interesting.
What you've got, just like it, because your paint is a primer for everything that goes on after it.
Yeah,
kind of by definition, I guess. The more spongy and absorbent it is, the more the moment you touch your brush to it, it'll just pull it out. The moisture that is.
There's got to be something said about. I've used a lot of sprays recently, working with Pat. We get random things sent to us, and I find Chaos Black is
so good.
It is so. I mean, I like using Mechanica Standard Grey. I've said this to some people when I've been like doing tuition stuff. Like, if you can't decide on like a colour, grey's perfect because you can go either way with it. But if you know you like working from like dark colours to light, probably black's great. If you're painting something yellow, maybe not black. Maybe go white. It might be easier. But I tend to find that grey and black tend to be the ones I use the most. But I always get really nice coverage with Chaos Black. Always have. And it's never failed me once.
We're in the UK as well. It's really good in humidity. It's an extremely unvolatile spray, which when you're somewhere humid is pretty important actually.
And when you're just hearing you talk about it, I was like, it is a really, really solid paint. Yeah, it's good. So Yeah, I've learned just like having what? How long was it? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Just sat down with you. I learned tons about.
We stippled a little box, didn't we? Basically.
Yeah. But the way you built it up did the finish was looked like an airbrush, and then just doing that last punch of a bright tone just on the edges and stuff was really, really good. Ooh, you've got the
Here's
the
one.
Artis T.
You need it. You need edges for deception.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever I've got going on, like if you look at the middle of any of those panels, I'll use some pictures of this afterwards or whatever. But if you look at the middle of any of these panels, it's not perfect at all. It's darker here, and then it ends up lighter here.
Yeah.
But as soon as you draw a little line around the edge, but it can still be dry brushed as well, your eyes just can look at that because that's how they're wired. You can't not do that. Same as if I put a transfer in the middle or anything. So that last 10%, as with anything, you hold in, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and you're like, oh, why am I bothering? Then you get to just the home straight.
Yeah.
Suddenly things look okay.
Yeah.
It does a lot for it just to have the little.
I find that when I'm
there.
doing scenery. Yeah. It always seems a bit like, oh, is this going to work? And you just do that last light. I tend to do boner over everything, even the wood and stuff. And it just makes it look really nice. And just like, oh, fantastic. But yeah, it was quite a learning curve, and seeing you stab and stipple.
Yeah,
in the
a bit more aggressive than you thought.
Yeah, absolutely. You were far more aggressive.
really, so gentle on the palette and then aggressive with the model is, if as a general rule of thumb. Yeah, why are you enjoying that? Sounds so good. Look good, look better.
Have it.
Yeah. Now, really, careful loading the brush. But then the moment you've not put too much paint on the brush, at that point, the brushes are incredibly resilient. The reason to use round ones, and with a high quantity of fine quality hair that is literally fine as well, is because you've got as many things as possible. It's called the packing with brushes, or the fill, jammed into a tiny space. And as long as you don't run the brush against itself, you can be so aggressive with them. Yeah. And nothing untoward will happen whatsoever.
You've got one that's 2-3 years
I brought it with me, actually. Yeah, I know it's a factory reject, so it's got a dink in the ferrule.
Oh, cool.
So that's I think I picked that one up just prior to lockdown, and it still looks surprisingly good.
It's amazing.
There's no paint. It hasn't got to the danger zone by the
I
ferrule.
would say still in the flesh, but it's done well. Have you got a name for it, like Old Reliable or something like that? It needs naming.
I should do at this stage, shouldn't I?
I started naming my paintbrushes. I'm not going to say what they are.
No, that's
Same name as my sword.
That's painting phase after dark.
I'm so mercenary with mine. I do have, if people might notice, actually the back of my brushes tend to have a colour on them. So if it doesn't have a colour, it's new enough to be fancy. And then it's black for metallics, and it's red for just really, really old, basically. But something I'd always encourage people to do is, if you retire a brush before it's completely fucked, that is ideal. So retire it at that point, and then use it for the tasks that are the most abusive while it still actually has some form. It doesn't need a point at all. Your base coating brush doesn't need the best point ever. Yeah. But if you take a good chunky, a size 3 or something, and you retire it before it's awful, that brush will go for so long. And every time you use a brush like that, you're extending the life of every single one of your other brushes, because this is it's like your wellies.
Yeah, no, I something I've been doing a lot, and some of them get really battered. So
they really do, don't they?
I've got a couple of base coat standard brushes, whichever company you use, the big number 3s or whatever, and they eventually become my rimming brush. So I use it all the time for just doing rims, because I don't need a point. I just want a nice. In fact, I want that. So it just goes around the rim quite nicely. And then when they start to get a certain point, they become my super fine dry brushes, which sounds really bizarre. But when you try and get into some really niggy bits,
completely.
I just just a little bit here.
I've got an old M1 which is now doing basically every task in the world. But you can do you can do micro dry brushing easily as well, and stippling.
It's almost like they have a life. Of different tasks as they get older. They just become a bit more so I'm just doing your feet now.
They'll go for so long though. It's really, really interesting. The thing is, paint has to make paint more effective, to take it beyond a layer paint. Basically, every single thing that isn't a layer paint is much more abusive than a layer paint. And however long ago only layer paints existed, essentially. So if we think before when it was the base range from Citadel, or heavy opaques from Vallejo, I think they were called. Every single paint was just a fairly nice, child-friendly acrylic that isn't going to kill your brushes. It's not going to cover a model very effectively either. But since then, every single advancement in paint almost has made paint more abusive to brushes, which is worth thinking about, because anything that's heavy coverage, like your foundation paints, your base paints, they're more abusive. Contrast gets right down into the ferrule and it does some nasty stuff.
Yeah.
The new washes as well. Any speed painty stuff, anything, all of it is way more physically abusive on brushes than paint was 20 years ago.
Something I found quite interesting about contrast.
And that's why Byron started a brush company.
We'll come to that in a second.
Just phased one in. Yeah.
Because I noticed with contrast paint that I usually give my brushes a good clean, but then I'll be using sometimes the same brush to apply some contrast, and you just get those little bits. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I found that the contrast paint is almost like a paint stripper.
Yeah.
It just seems to, so I have a pot medium now, which I just use to clean my brushes. So I just get it in there and then give it a wash of water.
Paints are best broken down by themselves, aren't they? And they layer over themselves better, and they're broken down by themselves better. So
Mad.
It makes sense. Yeah.
That's
weird.
Artis Opus. Let's talk about that. So, I mean, I don't know if we should go back to like maybe commission and work our way forwards. Actually, that might be a better way.
Yeah.
Wherever you'd like to start.
At the beginning.
At the beginning. God, that's a long time ago now. I brought my first white dwarf actually, because that's something I wanted to put on the table and ask you questions about later. So that'll give you a literal date of my first time in the hobby ever. But yeah, I was commission painter for somewhere between 1 and 2 years before starting Element.
Wow.
And my thing was, like I said, like I joked about like absolutely soulless speed and efficiency in painting. So that was I wasn't doing like high-end jobs. I was getting, at the time it was Necrons actually. I got featured in like a GW Online article. I did one, it was like a white shoulder pads, dark metal scheme with blue glowy bits.
Oh, cool.
And I got typecast very effectively
wow.
as that type of Necrons, and then as just Necrons in general. So about 90% of what I painted for 2 years was just Necrons.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't
Never
know
been
you
able to watch Terminator again.
In retrospect, that was good though, because they're very simple models.
Yeah.
It could have been like Blood Angels or something, couldn't it? That would have been dreadful.
Yeah, lots of base.
Yeah.
Cut all the bits off, that's why.
Yeah. And you get renowned for painting the, I don't know, Horus Heresy resin Primarchs in
17
incredible
dudes,
detail.
What's it? Some rosary beads and
Oh, you were talking about that before.
Yeah.
Too many rosary beads these days on 40k models.
yeah.
It's a Sigma.
So it was a lot of Necrons, and I was like, find a coloured spray, wash it, then dry brush it, then do the glowy bits, and then pick something striking that's fairly efficient, which was Deneb Stone on repeat with white added.
Deneb Stone.
Oh, that was a colour.
Oh, I'm familiar with that one.
That and charred and granite.
Imagine, like, I guess, pallid witch flesh, but better. It's,
Yeah,
it's like
okay.
slightly, bonier than
You
pallid
could
witch
use it
flesh.
for so many things, couldn't you?
Yeah, it was such a good colour.
Oh, it's great. So
Top colour.
Pale sand sort of scenario.
Yeah, I guess
Ish.
so, but it's like, yes, less yellowy, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a good... those foundation paints, to be fair, were really good, solid paints.
And they completely informed a painting style, didn't they? Which I think people have... Ninja touched on this recently in a video, actually, like very recently, a couple of days ago. Like, people have almost forgotten the base it slightly lighter than you would think, then wash it, because it was bases and shades.
Yeah.
And now it's, do whatever and then put contrast all over it. But they completely informed a painting style, didn't they, those?
Yeah.
Like, those two ranges when they released it was like 7 or 9 washes as well.
Yeah, it wasn't many.
They were incredible. It was so good.
Stunk like hell.
Yeah, they did. They really did.
We found out recently they've got bits of like organic matter in it and stuff, but
That goes off.
I know
Nice.
if I open my cupboard and I have a bit of a sniff, I know where my Devlin mud's
Like a bloodhound.
Yeah.
down around the back there.
It's in here somewhere. They were brilliant though, weren't they? So yeah, that was I painted using washes a huge amount, dry brushing a huge amount, that I kind of started thinking I think there's more to the technique at that point, but I hadn't really done it massively. That was my way of painting, which was informed by dip painting, which was actually my very first like mass production, was just find a red spray, which was from Halford's or something. And if you were painting a thing, just whatever I did, I worked out how to dip it.
Yeah.
And that's how I painted everything for
What were your armies
Dipping?
before
Yeah.
you started becoming a commission painter?
my personal armies. I had one ogre army and one chaos army that I spent far too long on. Always fantasy. Don't care about tanks personally. I like painting them, but there's no love for them. So it was always fantasy armies, and I had one Chaos Warriors army, which I spent forever on the snow on, and it turned yellow.
I
no.
know. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah,
You've been there, haven't you? Yeah.
It's really, really sad when that happens. And then I picked an ogre army, and I did that fairly slowly because I liked the big Gruffle Tusk things. And I think the yoga range is actually really nice.
Yeah.
So that was it. Then I just went completely headfirst into painting Necrons on repeat, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously you two guys are quite big into 40k, whereas I'm more of a fantasy at heart. I mean, I do 40k stuff and I've got a lot of fondness for it, but I do find that most of my sort of itches are fantasy based. So I sympathise. And the ogres, yeah, absolutely. I hope they get a bit of a revamp, some more bits and bobs to them. Cause if you've seen the Underworld sort of pirate guy, the Buccaneer, he's really cool. I want to see more stuff.
So much stuff comes out for Underworld. It's just like almost unrelenting, isn't it? And there's all these cool touchstones and ideas, like Assassin's Skaven. Right? Well, I hope that happens. Yeah,
well, they did a nice range of like character ogres years ago, didn't they? They did like a ninja ogre.
Oh yeah, that was like man-eaters.
Yeah, and then one that looked like he lived out in the desert. He was like his face was covered in a shemag and things like that. And they did that before, and I thought that was because the miniatures are so big, they really allow loads of that sort of adding character to go. This guy's very individual. He's from this part of the world, and I thought there was a really nice things because I always I did fantasy, but only under confrontation with Rackham's confrontation. So I played ogres, but their ogres didn't look like nothing like Warhammer ogres because I used to go, could I squeeze them in? They were just so completely different you couldn't. But I always thought the ogre range was lovely back in the day, and they had some
about
really
the scale as well. I hadn't thought about it like that because before everything started getting a bit bigger, apart from vampires who were shrinking.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why that is. They were like the original Chunky Boys, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, giants were like the next size up, and that was it. And then you'd get like, I remember them saying like the giant's the biggest kit we've done, and I was like, oh, cool. And nowadays that's puny in comparison to like some of the plastics that are coming out. Like the dragon, like the Stormcast dragon, it's just like huge.
Yeah.
Oh, it's vast, isn't it?
Yeah. Really, I mean, it's a great model. The only thing, bugbear with that is you get like a couple of builds, like the head. For this particular dragon, I forget what his name is now. It's one of the
Rundus.
That's it. Thank you,
Norman.
There's a few like sort of like bits you can change it, but it's both the same pose. Like if you just like had a different sort of joint in there to make it slightly retweak it. That's mainly bugbear with that kit, but it's a beautiful kit to paint.
The texture on it is sublime, and the baby drakes as well. I think they're a little bit of dynamic posing or just like nature reference away from being so good, but the texture's wonderful.
Yeah,
like really, like they will paint themselves.
Yeah,
if you're careful about it.
If we do it the Byron way.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Yeah. So on your Necron painting crusades, was that where you were kind of like dry brushing? And these brushes I'm using, what were you using at the time?
So I was using original dry brushes. Then I went to an art shop and I bought some more of that type, and I think that was like flats basically.
Yeah,
and I think that's what started me off thinking there's something wrong here, because they were higher quality ones and they lasted longer, but they still did that, which like became toilet brushes. And you definitely couldn't stipple with them. And in fact, it's only when you start using round ones you start being able to stipple without like instantly killing stuff. So at that point, I raided a girlfriend at the time's makeup bag, and I came out with like a really resilient synthetic kind of like tongue-shaped brush, which was only good for left and right dry brushing, but was very, very good for that. And then this chunky, don't know what it was, a round brush. And I started using those, and that was the point where I was like, actually, I think there is something here. There wasn't very much hair in them, but when you got the right amount of paint on it, that's when I started being able to do, so, I could do my edges. So, because I was the Croissant, the Necron vehicle. What else are you going to call the way that I would paint was I would try and involve airbrushing, dry brushing, washing, and everything. Because if one takes care of just general colours, once the raised areas, and then once the recesses, but it also knocks back bad airbrushing or bad dry brushing, it makes it a little less chalky. So like the holy trinity, if you will, for speed. I tried to use that for everything, and I realised that I could get the edges with a dry brush then if you did circles. And that was kind of the start of me thinking, like, if there was I just wanted a bigger one. Yeah. Always wanted a bigger dry brush.
Don't we all?
Give it a couple of months. So, soon to be copied by everyone else. So I had this big brush, but I wanted an even bigger one. And when I found one that was as close as possible, I realised how much time you could save just by buffing, or like buffing. It's like you're trying to dust off a model.
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah.
And that's when I had the real breakthrough, I think. And that's when people started telling me that I wasn't dry brushing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had to take that as a compliment.
What were you? Oh, as in they'd look at it and
Whatever
go,
I
that's
was
not
doing.
dry
I don't
brush.
know, or
yeah.
because there was airbrushing involved, even though you can't airbrush edges, somehow it was the responsibility of the airbrush that stuff ended up like that.
Oh, of course.
But I'm
Yeah,
still used to
obviously.
that now.
Yeah.
That's,
It's interesting because I remember when I moved into the studio and Mark Jones did a lot of scenery, and he was just like, because I'd initially like dry brush like left and right, up and down, just try not to get
across the
cracks.
grain.
Yeah, absolutely. I always used to say that as well, go against the grain or whatever. And sometimes you have lots of text, you're like, well, we're doing it in different directions. And Mark was like, why don't you just do circular motions and just take your time?
Yeah.
Because that's what you used to do scenery all the time and get a really nice effect of the
Yeah.
scenery. And I was like, I never thought about that. Sometimes you get like crop circles if you're not careful, because I was still learning at the time. I was like, why is that all swirly? He's like, because you're not removed enough, you idiot. I'm like, oh yeah.
Well, you get it, if you're doing a circle, you get them on like the upstroke or the downstroke.
Yeah.
If it was a flat brush, because while it's going across or at an angle,
Yeah.
it's right. But the moment everything's dragged in, it's like you're doing calligraphy, almost, isn't it? You just get like a smear.
Yeah.
That's when they used to happen. Yeah.
Turn out into weathering after a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chip it.
Well, it's just like basing, isn't it? That's where the tufts go.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that on the side of a tank quite so easily.
If it's Nurgle, you could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do whatever the hell you want with Nurgle, I think, can't you? Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
See my paint, you know I do.
so commissioning went well.
It was. I really liked it actually, and I learnt a lot. Kind of like perversely, I think I'd love to go back now and try it and just see.
Yeah.
I know it'd be really hard, and I don't want to do it as a
Don't
job.
charge £3 a model like I did. You get loads of comments.
Well, apparently Siege are higher, and I've seen an advert the other day. So.
that would go full circle. I started AO with James. Yeah.
Of course, yes, yeah.
Yeah. I'd really like to try it now. So I did commission for a bit, and then so how it would go would be I was painting for people who wanted armies. It wasn't like display pieces, or if they wanted something to display, it was 2,000 points. So I was fast turnaround from them ordering in case they were a tournament gamer, and I did know the tournament gaming scene, and that's kind of how I helped myself get into it. Same with Element as well. Like we were always very, very attached to tournaments in the UK. So I'd say, okay, it'll be, let's say it's a troop of 10 guys or 20 guys or whatever. It'll be about a month. It's a week for me to order it, and I try and order it from somewhere I get a discount.
Yeah.
And then it'd be 2 weeks for me to build it and paint it, nice and casual. And then it'd be a week for me to safely post it back to someone, and they'd have it for their tournament, their event, or they just get it fast enough that, they weren't bored of the idea, which I was always really worried about. And actually what would happen would be I'd order it from Maelstrom or Wayland, because Wayland and Maelstrom were like the big two then.
Yeah.
Maelstrom was such an amazing shop.
I
Did you
never
ever go?
I never went to their shop. I saw pictures. It looked amazing.
It killed me when it went. It was
a
if you were
listed
driving
building,
out
wasn't
towards
it?
Kings Mill Hospital that direction, in an industrial estate. It was an old mill,
Yeah.
and it was just like proper old raw brick built.
I saw pictures. It had like pillars inside,
and it sold when it was that point when the other companies were now starting to make enough of a footprint on Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Like, Infinity was starting to become
they had their own range. They had
Battlefront,
Muse as well.
Flames of War was starting to become a thing, and why I used to go Confrontation, and I used to play Infinity as well. And they were things now that they weren't like apologetically just in the corner and everything else was Games Workshop. They felt the Maelstrom pushed their presence. So when you went in, it was a really lovely place to go where you could rattle a blister instead of just having to buy it online. You could go in and
see
see
your first
stuff.
display of something that isn't a Games Workshop thing. Like, I
Yeah, and
remember
it
the
was-
first time I saw an Infinity board, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, and they had a board. They had boards in there made by the first of those companies that started doing all the laser etched.
Yeah.
They were the first to
Sarissa.
see that. And
Sarissa,
yeah.
that's the very gang. And it was a really great shop. And then it had gaming area downstairs, gaming area upstairs with a bar, and it was
Amazing.
perfect. And then in the blink of an eye, it was gone.
Yeah,
Although
because
the
I remember the name,
under-
but I've not heard it for a while. Because I knew Wayland Element, and I was always like, I'm sure there's another one. I can't remember what it was. It would have been
And they went.
Maelstrom.
Yeah, such a shame.
That's a shame.
They were around, and I'd get my stuff from them. But generally, my month would involve me ordering, it not coming, and then me chasing it, and then me basically having 72 hours to keep to my deadlines.
Oh, amazing!
Which I always did. But I was basically fueled by like dubstep and 15-hour painting sessions. That's the only way to do it. I remember painting 50 Necron infantry. They were built, but start to finish in 15 hours bubble wrapping them, then falling asleep at I finished as the post office opened, went and dropped them off, and then just fell asleep. I can remember thinking
in the post office.
Practically. I remember thinking like, this is awful.
Yeah.
And Greg, who I mentioned, this is quite a long time ago, so at the time he's nocturnal, he was on MSN. It's like, what are you doing up? I'm like, it happened again. And it'd be like the third time. He's like, where are you buying this stuff? And I showed him Wayland, and I showed him Maelstrom. He's like, he's not suffering with modesty. He was like, I could do better than that. He's a programmer. So we started chatting, and the idea was that we would not lie about what was on our website. We would build up our stock. Greg would program in the morning, I would paint in the morning, and then I would post out in the evening. And that was the entire business structure for the business. Worked out.
And that was for Element.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was we started in April 2012. So sometime in that winter, I think. I remember because I went on a climbing holiday just before we started, and my job was to come up with our logo while I was away.
Ooh, where did you go climbing? Sorry.
I went to Fontainebleau.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Beautiful place. Just so nice. Yeah. Really, really nice. But I went there and I had this little sketchbook with me, which I still have, and it just had all these different E's and G's. But Greg came up with the name, and he's like, well, I did the name, you do the picture. So that's how we work things out. Seems fair. So I went away and had all these different E's and G's pointing different ways, and then we eventually came up with our logo, and came back and started the business with all of our money in the world, which basically was one shelf worth of stock.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. If we'd had more money,
probably more behind you than what you started with.
Yeah, and definitely more at my house than what we started with. But I think if we had more money, we wouldn't have started, because I would have thought it was a really big risk.
Yeah.
But as it was, we put like £2,000 worth of stock onto a shelf in my parents' shed, and that's how we started the business, because you didn't need us. We were lucky you didn't need a store. Yeah. At the time, and that came in pretty fast actually, and we were quite scared by it. But you didn't need a bricks and mortar presence to sell online.
No.
That happened in like our first year, I think, actually.
Oh wow! So it grew pretty quick.
No, actually, it was really slow.
Oh.
Really slow, and really worrying for like only in like so far as we'd wasted our time.
Yeah.
But for the first 9 months were really slow.
Were you still day jobbing it at the same time?
I was commission paying, so I could work it around it. But I was basically, I'd get up, and as orders kind of built up, I was essentially working nearly 2 full-time jobs. So I'd start really early, do the packing, get back. We had a kitten at the time, and I'd just lie down, put the kitten on my chest. She'd fall asleep, I'd fall asleep, my alarm would go off. An hour later, I'd wake up and I'd commission paint until 2 in the morning. I just did that.
Oh wow!
Basically 1.5 years.
That sounds relentless.
It was. I would want to do it again. I would
It fascinates me how like these companies start, like the grassroots side of things, like your parents' shed, just like using it for stock, and now look where you are and what you're doing. It's incredible. I guess it's testament to like keeping at it and pushing through, and
just try to do things consistently. I think a lot like you guys, we wanted to do our thing honestly and clearly, and how we'd like to do it, and we just worked really hard on putting that out, and that was it. And that makes it kind of simple, really. When I guess it's like I don't have one, but hopefully it's like having a kid where you're like, I want the best for the child.
Yeah.
So that was every single decision was just what is the best for this business, and we always saw completely eye to eye on that in every single sense. Actually, made it quite a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, fantastic.
And sometimes the best for the child is to hear him cry. You're not having it. It'll kill you.
Maybe much like a child, we made most of our mistakes while we were small.
And it's repressed them all already. Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So 2012 Element Games started, and obviously you've got a premises now. And
yeah.
I mean, how many shops do you have?
So we've got 6 in total. We've got 3 smaller ones around the Stockport area, and then we opened up Sheffield and Nottingham.
Yeah.
Right in lockdown.
Nice.
Actually,
I remember that.
I think we were. It's good to be cautious, but in that period, everything was so worrying. I think maybe we were overly worried about whether they would be okay or not. But they've gone really well, actually. I believe you shop at them.
That does make a lot of sense, because when you had your airbrushing thing at Element, and popped down, and I was like, how have I not seen this before? I've been to Nottingham loads, and I've been around this area.
You get distracted by Prime Minister.
Probably, yeah.
They've had a bit of a rebrand. Prime Minister,
haven't they?
Changed to something really pretentious.
Yeah. Well, they are it's sort of like Pie Minster come Sports Bar now, isn't he? They still sell the food by Pie Minster, but they're now called something else, and we've got a pool table.
It'll just end up being an Irish pub, won't it?
Eventually,
Yeah.
It'll just be Pie Minster, but only with Irish fillings.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, hey, trendy bar with cocktails, and we also sell pies, and it's like, that's a weird combination.
It is,
and then just around the corner, Element Games.
Weird. I think that's the first time I've been into Nottingham City Centre since lockdown.
Yeah.
Because there was never a need, really. So I was just straight back to Derby.
That's it. That's why the high street's dying.
I remember that as you were getting Element ready in Nottingham, I was constantly just like that through the sliver, the sliver that you had over the windows, going, "What have they got on stock? I can see X-Wing, but I can't see anything else." And I was like desperate, counting down the minutes till it opened,
squeezing stuff in. We just packed it with paint ranges, basically. I think that's where we started.
I was shocked by the amount of paints in that place. Because you were saying you'll have a heart attack when you go out.
Yeah, we warned you, didn't we?
Yeah, I was like, nothing. No, that's crazy. I've seen lots of paint. I was like, whoa, how much paint?
It's crazy these days.
It's amazing.
I arrived to see this on the table.
The old reliable of Bold Titanium.
Yeah,
I love that paint.
Yeah,
so good. That baffles me as well. That paint does. Like, I can keep thinning it.
It's just obnoxious, isn't it? You're like, I'll mix a little bit of this with, a black or something. It's like, I'm still here. Yeah. What are you doing? You're white.
You should be grey now. That's mad. And then when did Artis Opus? I like how it's AO, because I always think of like the
the remains,
the delivery, and getting your washing machine sorted.
That was no washing machines, but about 6 years ago. I think that was myself and Greg and James, who you just had on a couple of months ago from Siege. We started that because we thought the world needed nice brushes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
started with just Series S, actually, and a smaller selection of smaller brushes from Series S, actually. I think we went up to 2. So it was a very, very... It was a very tiny beginning, actually, as far as companies go. We kickstarted in, like, the traditional... We started our business with that Kickstarter sense. I'd come up... Prior to that, I'd been involved in Steamforged games, and Steamforged got quite big quite fast. Went from Guild Ball to bigger licenses, and some stuff was being produced in other continents. And I was really sure that I wanted to, if I started something new, I wanted to fully understand the thing, or, very well understand the thing at the very least. And I wanted it to, as much as possible from day one, our idea was we would like things to come from as few miles away as possible. Just for our own sanity, if anything. Actually, so that's why we picked what we did, teamed up, and then we started on Kickstarter. Yeah.
Just because we had Tom on a couple of weeks back, and he said that there's like 3 groups of old ladies around the country that make brushes.
Yes.
Would this be the same group of old ladies?
You have to have, so the hair's more expensive than gold now by, I think it's like twice the price of gold per gram. It doesn't weigh much, but still,
Holy crap.
Damn.
It's really not cheap. So to work with it,
Peach Linsky.
To work with it, basically, you're required to have worked with other expensive hair for, it's like 3 or 5 years. And there is an old Winsor & Newton, like little documentary about the people who make the brushes. And it is exactly that. Like, it's such an old-fashioned analog thing. You see these people just handling stuff, and it's like, it's like someone tossing dough. Yeah, like, you've done that for 10,000 hours, and if you gave it to me, I'd be like, right. So exactly what I mean. And they'll just be like doing this or something, or tying or gluing or whatever, and it's just nothing but like. And it is old lady. It's patient, really, really old school. A lot of like made in the north, basically, and it's just people who've been doing the same thing beautifully for decades. Yeah, and it's probably stepping away from that. The larger companies, at least, and the QC attached that allowed us to step in, actually, I would say, because the QC is just as important as the manufacturer.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and you can tell with the brushes that you got, because I've got a set of the dry brushes. And
you give them a lick and don't you?
Oh, I love licking my brush.
It stands like, are you buying that? Yeah, okay, well, now you can lick it, do that on your tongue and that.
Ooh, yeah. I've never done that with a new brush.
Oh no, you just draw a circle on your tongue and you'll know instantly.
The absolute opposite to that is that barber and scissors are an extraordinarily delicate thing.
Yeah.
And when you have them sharp, they're so delicate that when your guy comes in to sharpen them, to check that the cut is, because you can put, if you don't sharpen it correctly, you can do what's called put a blind in it, which is it'll cut and then it'll stop, and then you have to force past it, so you end up with like this,
like stutter.
It's like a stutter, and they call it a blind, and they're so delicate that when your scissor sharpener guy or lady comes in, they'll take a standard nose tissue, and they'll split it to a single, and then they cut into only a single. They won't even cut into a double piece of tissue, and then put it up to the light and have a look. So that's how delicate they are.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine. You know that thing with dads when you're going to make an expensive purchase, and even if dads don't know anything about it, they feel like they should come with you anyway. And he went to buy scissors, and he said, "Can I have a look at this ones and this ones and this ones?" And the guy goes, "Oh, I've got one of them here." And he put them out, and he went, "Have a look at them." He says, "I'll go and get the others out the back." And my mate was like looking at the scissors and getting a feel for them, because they have to feel right. Never mind, just be very good at what they are. And he's had a look at them, and then he put them down. And his dad went, "So they really sharp then?" He went, "Yeah, Dad, they were really sharp." And he went, "Really?" And he went, "Yeah." He went, "How sharp are they?" And picked them up and started cutting a fingernail off with them, right? And the guy came out with the other ones and just went, "So they're the ones you're buying then?" Besides, like, I've never been so embarrassed and realised what an idiot my father is. So really,
that's great.
That thing of just like that thing about like things being delicate and just getting it exactly right.
Good tools are a special thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
You're going to spend so long with it in your hand, it should at least behave predictably at the very least, and ideally last for a long time. People don't realise as well, like, don't know if scissors do this.
Well, one of my pairs are 15 years old.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think I will have no scissor left, from being sharpened. There's been nothing, those scissors left.
You definitely get used to them, and people don't realise how much let's say you're base coating, but you're base coating with a good brush. I'm sure everyone here will have done this. You're like, you're base coating it. Maybe it's not your best brush, but you get used to its behaviour, and you base coat the entire model, and then you pick up your other brush, and you're like, and then you go for your base coating brush again.
Yeah.
That's not because your base coating brush is better. It's because you have adjusted to your base coating brush, and you know exactly how much it's going to bend, how much paint it takes to behave predictably, and predictable is the important stuff with painting, and how much flex it's got, and all that type of stuff, or how you could use its edge. And it might have an aspect, like I always end up looking at the writing on them for this. It might have an aspect that if you're going downwards, it behaves better from, because it's a natural hair product. And you've done all of that like little quiet mental meditation and adjustment, and then you just slap yourself and grab another brush. And this is why often you pick up the other brush and you don't particularly like it until you've adjusted to that as well.
Yeah, I've found that with I got into a phase of using a 3S all the time.
The right brush.
Yeah, I really like it. And then I went to like one of the 000s to try and do something, and was just like, oh well, I'm doing fine detail. I'll get the really fine detail brush, and just like splodged everywhere. And went back to my 3 and did a better job. I guess, because I'm used to it.
People completely underestimate that, and your like brushes break in, and your head also breaks in every session. So if you sit down and you start off with a simple task and you're using that brush for it, very often that's the brush that your head will want to continue using, unless it was like way different or something, or you're changing from a brush style to a different brush style. Yeah, adjustment to them is really important.
I tend to find I keep to like 3 types of brushes, which is a dry brush, usually like a medium-sized one, which does a lot of things that I need to do. Something like what I'll just call a standard-sized brush, like a regiment brush, probably a 3. I imagine that would be. As well. And then just something small that I'd rarely use, but it'd be like eyes at most. Although you can get a good point on like the medium brush, and that would do a lot of the legwork. But yeah, I've got all these brushes, and I tend to be a creature of habit and just keep to a group of 3, sometimes 4, depending
Completely.
on what.
I'm the same. I'm like odd numbers until I step down to a 00. So it's like a 5, a 3, maybe a 1, but often I'll just completely skip the 1 out and go all the way down to a 00 because I am painting a nose or an eyes or teeth or whatever. So yeah, it's just
mad, isn't it?
3s.
When did the woodwork element come into Artis Opus then?
So we always wanted our stuff to be protected, and it's very important how people think of things, right? Because like you can't put your brush in the wrong way around if it's in its box. Yeah, stuff like that. Like it trains you to treat them with respect. We had them. We didn't make the cases ourselves, and they did come from China. And then we started having QC issues, and we were at a stage then where we'd just bought new premises, a new workshop, and we had a chat. And Chris, who's really integral to everything manufacture and everything workshop, he said he thought that we could maybe bring that in-house. And we've been playing with more and more with the lasers or stuff like that. We've got some other products that we've been working on for years that we've been prototyping that we would make ourselves, and the cases as well that ended up happening. And he said, I think we can do that. This was in lockdown when everything closed, shipping went crazy, containers went mad, and the world became very confusing. So we had a pretty wobbly few months, actually. We brought that in-house, and it just grew and grew and grew. The moment that you're fully in control of something, things shift astronomically. So it's both way more relaxing and way more worrying. We brought that in, and we found that the degree of control and the quality we could put out just shot up. And we're doing things in such a, basically past the CNC that is like the beating heart, and that's where things are cut out or frames are made or whatever. After that point, everything's so old-fashioned that we're doing in there. It's like people with old-school dangerous machinery that you'd seen in Grandad's shed, like by hand, and that's it, apart from the laser finishing, basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the transatlantic guys, where they make all their...
I saw that video and I sent it to Chris immediately, and he was like, I get it. Yeah. That's great.
There's a lot to be said about like doing stuff in an industry where you again, starting from grassroots, doing it in a shed and using old methods and techniques, because nowadays people want that. People want that, the actual, not like something that, I mean, 3D printing's nice, and, you know, people are...
Want something plastic with skulls on it?
Well, yeah.
No. No, I want plastic skulls on my models, and that's it.
But yeah, having like woodwork, because my brother's really into, like, he's got his own like Instagram channel, and he does a lot of woodwork and stuff. And I remember my mum was saying, like, and, you know, he'd agree with it, he didn't really do that much in the way of DIY. Wasn't particularly, because I'm useless at DIY. That's, my wife's very good at DIY. She loves that, and she's got loads of tools in her lady cave. I regret using that name, but that's the name she calls it. That's her name. She's got a sign. I've got a man cave, she's got a lady cave. It's just the way it is. But she's got all sorts of things like pillar drills and like miter saws and stuff like that. She's got loads of things in there. Unfortunately, the entire work surface is covered by wood. Yeah, she likes making things by hand, and my brother does, and just seeing the results and just the tactile sensation of having it in your hands.
There's nothing like... I think we didn't do an adequate job with the cabinets of getting across just how nice they are to like to touch, or to like, they're very, very solid. And there is something like, we're doing an analog hobby, and I feel really strongly that people should be proud of the fact that it's analog and like celebrate it, and also display stuff with pride, not with shame, or not display it at all. And all of that, I think, kind of fits together.
Excuse me. I might have been on.
But another thing is also that old machinery is just better. Like an old bandsaw from like decades and decades ago is as good or better than a new bandsaw, and if it breaks, you can fix it.
Yeah.
We are like, we have a van, and constantly we are going away to get machinery that is older than I am. Yeah. Because it's the best.
Yeah.
It's still the best.
But it's made to last, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
Yeah, it's like...
So what's bad about, say, like a modern day bandsaw?
So I'm definitely not an expert, but... No. Basically, the reason we're buying older ones is that they're still not broken. They've got the same safety stuff on that they did have, and they're less delicate. And you know, they're dinked when we get them. They've already been broken in thoroughly, and that's just their state. They're going to live like that forever. Like this wooden table, like it's not going to chip down to a different color or anything like that. You could sand it back if you wanted. It's just going to go and go and go and go until the day that it dies, which might also be never.
Yes.
And that's the same for loader, actually.
You'll often find as well, like the bolts and the screws are like universal bolts and screws you can get from anywhere, where a lot of things nowadays are very bespoke and
in their own. Yeah.
Or like particular housing or something that isn't actually, that's not how the machine works. Like the body of a car, it's just there.
Because it's like that with loads of stuff at the minute, isn't it? Like, I mean, like with some of the camera equipment I buy, all the tripods I buy, I have to make sure fit the plates that I have, the sliders that I use are all part of the same ecosystem, and they like delivered a package to the wrong place, and I was sending them emails and be like, where is it? And like 3 months later they sent me a new one, and I was like, if I didn't have to buy this because it fits in with all of the other stuff that I have, so that's a big part of it. And I like Instagram, like it's like follow this link and you go to YouTube, but you're still in Instagram because they want to keep you there and all that sort of stuff.
Interesting.
But yeah,
fascinating.
Darling.
Sarcasm much. That was cool, but no, it's fine. But yeah, there's I name drop him on here. I used to all the time. There's a YouTuber called Alex Steele, who's a blacksmith, and he buys old like power hammers and all that sort of stuff, and it's always really old stuff. that was like, yes, this was made by my granddad's generation, and it's brilliant. Yeah.
Anything like that. You look at like brush crimpers. So just the simple thing that squidges the ferrule to hold everything in place. A load of the ones of those used by huge companies, they will be like legacy. They'll be over 100 years old.
Wow.
And it's just a thing that clamps some stuff.
Yeah.
But it, like, some have been lost, sadly. Take a banana.
I'm not going to eat it yet because I'll probably like,
some have been lost, some have been chipped or whatever, but the ones that are still going will be just as good as they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some stuff's just, you can't reinvent it, can you?
No,
You know?
and there's absolutely no need to. Like a standard pointy brush, like there is no reason for that to change, or a violin, or, you know, that like it's reached peak form.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason to change it whatsoever.
yeah.
Because I often, getting into 40k, and it's like, oh, humanity used to make all this old stuff, but we don't know how to make it anymore. And people are like, that's so unrealistic. And I remember doing a bit of reading on like space travel and this, that, and the other, and people are like, oh, we're gonna go back to the moon, and people go, well, why don't you just make the rocket again that went to the moon? And it's like, but most of the people that made that are dead, and we don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah.
There's nobody born after 1935 has set foot on the moon.
Yeah.
Is how
Yeah.
the idea of that perspective.
Well, that's just going to add to the conspiracy that's all online then, isn't it? Oh, no.
No, there's great videos online where people are like debunking the fact that it's a myth.
Well,
like
Dave used to say this all the time. It was like, all that money they spent, if it is a fake, they might as well just use it to go to the moon.
yeah. But there's some VFX guys, Corridor Crew on YouTube, and they looked at the video and were like, to do this, the technology at the time just didn't exist. So they would have had to spend a ludicrous amount of money.
Well, didn't that old gag, wasn't it? Because the rumour was that they'd hired Stanley Kubrick to film the fake moon landings. And, you know, and obviously Stanley Kubrick was massively a perfectionist. And they said Stanley Kubrick, they hired him, but the problem was Stanley Kubrick believed in shooting on there. Actually shooting in the environments you're meant to be, so they had to go to the moon to do it.
yeah. So I love that, talking about paintbrushes, and then we get onto moon landing conspiracies.
That's how the show goes, man.
Well, tell you what, I'll
wild.
try and segue it back. So if you look at technology and what we're capable of, people often talk about synthetic brushes, and to give you an idea of how perfect hairy hair is, you have to look at what people are using in like the Arctic or whatever. So they've replaced their donkeys with skidoos, but they're still wearing polar bear hair, and that's because technology hasn't yet got to a point where we can make something that gets to a point artificially that is as good as a hair. So the hair, it's got sheaths on it, it's natural, it kind of slides over each other, it can be like revitalized and brought back to life in a way that other things can't. And if you look at a polar bear hair, that's actually got a bubble down the middle, which is why it insulates so well. That's why it's white. So still, humans cannot make that, even though there's definitely a cause for people to want to be warm or outdoor clothing or whatever. There's so much technology that hasn't nearly caught up to where it should be yet. And that's why synthetic brushes don't behave the same, because essentially they are a really long noodle that's been chopped to a point. And there's some things you can do around the point, but it won't do that.
Yeah.
That beautiful thing, it won't do that quite so well.
Oh, interesting.
So that's
Have you ever thought about trying to develop a
keenly
synthetic
for
brush?
half a decade. Like,
Oh, wow.
So we're still there is, it's the closest it's ever been, but it's still not there.
Well,
Yeah.
if you decide that maybe moving into the idea of making paintbrushes out of human hair, me and you could start a business, because I've got lots of resources for that. Just bags of it. Just bags of it. Have it in whatever colour you like as well. I can sort that out for you. You know, maybe more like a tougher brush could be more like a redhead, because the redhead to people's hair is more robust. And you come and see me. We'll have it sorted.
Well, you've also got facial hair. It's different.
facial
Finally,
hair.
for the dry brush of the size that I want.
Yeah.
Why don't just dry
brush.
brush a tighten in a one go? We could get it.
I'd love to dry brush it.
That would be quite funny. That would be a great video.
That'd be a
wouldn't it?
video, wouldn't it? I tried brush this tighten with
That
human
seems-
hair.
That seems to be one of the default ways to get views now, is to do a Titan.
Paint a Titan, yeah.
Paint a Titan
Yeah.
and talk about Henry Cavill, all while using a Swedish accent. That's the way to get you.
Somebody, I was chatting to recently. It may well have been some of the people in this room. I can't remember, but bringing it up recently, where they were like, "Oh, like Henry Cavill, he was all like, I love Warhammer. Warhammer's great." After that visit, and it got announced that have an agreement in principle. He's just like, yeah, I'm an actor now.
Like barbecuing.
He
has
has
my dog.
Yes, yeah. Like he hasn't posted about how great Warhammer is or anything like that. Like since then.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because you weren't in the build. That's why because you weren't there that day.
Maybe.
If we'd have been there that day, we'd have been watching the telly series by now.
Do you reckon?
Yeah. I think that's where it was.
I mean, I did decline a job on The Witcher.
Well,
it's one of the monsters.
I stopped watching the most recent Witcher series. I thought it was crap. I watched one episode and I was like, nah.
apparently it's had 30% reduction in views.
I've been slogging through it over a couple of nights, the first episode. It has taken longer than normal because straight away normally you get like the very first episode of Witcher is just slugging out those guys in the street and just like murderifying them in a horrible way, which was great. You wouldn't fight with a sword like that. That'll be clear. You can't fight with a sword.
Yeah, I'm not telling you that.
Backhanded without no real. But it looks cool.
It does look cool.
It looks cool.
Yeah, really cool.
You just lose your sword. Someone just because you've not got when you hold it like that, you've got all like momentum and stuff. When you have it like that, it's all in the wrist, and it's like really lame.
This great big long weighty thing.
Yeah,
but it's Henry Cavill's wrist, so it's fine.
Regardless, a wrist is a wrist.
Yeah.
Although sadly, people always want to. They always portray experts when it comes to knife fighting in movies, with them fighting like that, and you will always go that way.
You always go that way, don't you?
Because you create your. If the other person has a knife, you create your own guard.
All my fighting skills have been taught by Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
All I know is to do that.
Yeah.
Well, if the other person has
And do the splits.
and if the other person has a knife,
Just like intimidate them.
the other person has a knife. If the minute you do that, you create something that's stopping your chest or your face being. And when you put it into somebody, your natural emotion is to carry on. So you create enormous big gashes. That is too precise to do.
Yeah.
And
Gruesome.
doing that allows it to be taken off. But that's a harder thing to grab hold of. So that way with a sword, no. But that way with a knife, yes.
Yeah, different.
And now we know.
Different tools.
And there you go.
Yeah. So paintbrushes.
After the murder
We've gone back to the murder
It's just so
segment.
much harder to kill someone with some.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to murder anyone with a paintbrush? No, good.
I bet Vin
I've
Diesel
seen,
has.
I've seen some people murder some paintbrushes in front of me, though. That's for sure.
So, do you ever watch someone use your Artis Opus brushes and does it just make you want to die inside?
Yeah, it's called the painting phase anyway.
It's the scoop. It's the scoop and then the like ploughing head first into tissue. It's dreadful.
Yeah, that's definitely the painting phase. Isn't it?
I do find it really hard, and I'm so used to demoing now from shows. That when I do classes, like when someone gets to take the brush away from me, I just have to put my hands behind my back.
Oh, because
Yeah, but it's really helpful actually. The moment you see other people starting to do it, you just try and work out the way to make it the most digestible. Why not to do that? Or things like you and Mini Wargaming Dave spoke about the very kindly actually, thank you, spoke about stuff like how straight up the brush was and things like that when I work. So you're looking at other people, and the moment they do something wrong, you're like, right, how do I make it as clear as possible that the tip has to point upwards or something like that, and that's how you kind of end up changing your language for teaching, I guess.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you talk about that as well, because you have so many sort of behaviours that you follow when you do a thing, but then having to step back and communicate that.
Teaching's completely different. Teaching will absolutely make you better at the thing you do, or at least understand it more. I think it makes such a big difference. So many things were just completely passive, or just like your piece of wood or whatever, you'll do them because you think they make a difference, or this works. It's almost like like, oh, it's good luck, I'll take my board out, but actually there's a really good reason that thing works. Yeah.
See, the channel going well?
Yeah, really well actually. I think maybe this year we'll hit 100k, which would be pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
I wouldn't have expected that.
No.
I only started in lockdown because I felt impotent, so
So running a shop, getting like wood made, and then doing a YouTube channel all in lockdown. Intense.
Yeah.
Busy
Well,
man.
we ran out of when GW closed. Element fully ran out of stock for a bit. Got the lowest I've ever seen the shelves. That was crazy.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, that was a complete oddity. So we got really, really low, and then we had this other company. I was like, well, what can I do? What might people want to do? So I thought, well, I'll try teaching, and started. The first few videos are so bad. I should probably delete them. I think.
Look at my old Warmer TV ones. They're just awful, absolutely awful. Me looking at camera, not even smiling, going, I'm really excited about this video. It's just so cringy. It was like a little one-to-one when the 3 new presenters turned up and we'll train, and you could see they're like really nervous and they were struggling at times to like talk to camera. I was like, this will make you feel better. Watch this. And they're like, oh God, you were awful. I was like, yeah, I know.
I found them. I was looking for a quote the other day from something, and you'll know what I'm going to say next when I tell you what I was looking for a quote from.
Uh-oh.
And I found a video that I didn't know existed. That was you, Louise.
Oh, is this
Duncan.
Blackstone Fortress?
No,
Hang Out and Hobby?
no. I was looking for a quote from the movie Conan.
Oh God, not that blooming
And I didn't even know it existed until I found it yesterday. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal because I was looking at it because I was looking for that. What is the best thing in life, Conan?
Sturdy range ruler, dice in my hand and wind in my head.
If you've not seen it, it's and I'm not even.
Do you know something about that video?
I'm not even taking the mick. I thought it was amazingly funny.
So-
have you seen it? Have you, Pat?
No, no.
I'll have to show you. So when we were doing the build-up for that,
I know of it, but I haven't seen
I said to my boss at the time, I was like, right, so I've got to be a barbarian from Hyboria. Cool. Can I do like a Skyrim voice, like a Nord or something like that? And he was like, some people might get offended. I was like, Nords don't exist. It's Skyrim. He was like, yeah, but it's Scandinavian. Some people might get offended. I was like, I'm being a Nord. It's like not even a thing. I was like, all right. And then weirdly, whatever fur I was wearing gave me such a... I was worried that night because I didn't think I could... I was struggling to breathe when I got home, but I had a massive allergic reaction to whatever furs I was wearing. You know how Bugman's has loads of napkins and like cups? I used every tissue from every table. I was streaming from the eyes, I was streaming from the nose, I was constantly sneezing.
Oh,
every
God.
take was like, I was like sneezing like 10 times, then would get like 30 seconds before I'd sneeze again. It was awful. And that voice is now put on, that is just how my voice was as the night progressed.
Just your asthmatic voice.
You being haggard. It sounds like the 2 weeks
But-
of recording through hay fever I had recently.
Yeah,
It's really it's really depressing just staring at yourself looking awful, trying to be more happy and enthusiastic than you are.
Yeah.
Like a big red nose and everything.
Oh, yeah. It's dreadful.
I find myself looking in the camera and I'm like, wow, I look awful. And then I'll kind of like take a breath in and try and inflate myself and then just go,
I haven't even got enough effort to hold a breath.
The joy of the editor to get to see that stuff as well.
Yeah,
I think that's the
yeah.
big thing I've always found. Like, it's always the editors that make you look good. Thanks, Pat.
Got your back, babe.
It's like so many times I just say stupid things or just like, oh, how did that come across? I'm like, let's try that one more time. I'm like, okay, let's try it one more time, and then I'll do it a bit different. And they're like, cut elements from one, cut elements from another. So yeah, the only reason I look good in any of the things I've done is because of the editor.
Skillful peeps.
Well, your videos are very honest because you sometimes mangle what you're saying and then you just leave it in, and then if anything, highlight more to it that you've done it, don't you?
Yeah, so there's always I don't think anyone sits down and like, oh well, this can take forever. That would be fine, but there's never much time, so stuff has to work, and if something doesn't work, it often just doesn't get done.
Yeah.
So everything is kind of pushed through in that sense, I guess.
But I think it creates more of a human aspect to do that.
I think so. We leave our mistakes in, the mistakes on the models. They are a point of the video specifically. Like that 80% that we spoke about earlier, 80% of the way through a model. I think it's really important for people to know that things don't go right, slips happen, and often you just haven't thought about something enough, and you do something without thinking, and then you're, oh well, I've ruined my model.
Yeah.
So we always try and specifically include, if not make a point of the stuff that goes wrong, because I think it's very, I don't know how you feel about this actually, like where we are now in the hobby, so we are the broadest we've ever been, there's the most people in the holiday, and we're also the shallowest we've been because the smallest percentage of people, they've not been indoctrinated through like White Dwarf or whatever.
Yeah.
So people's level of general knowledge about painting on average, despite the fact that there's all these products out there on the internet and everything, it's not come from one source, and it's kind of disparate and scattershotted. And I think people don't know about mistakes and how often they happen and stuff like that nearly as much as they used to.
Yeah, it's something I was very aware of when I was at Warmer TV, because we'd always cut them out, but we're not showing that because it makes the product look bad. I was like, but that's part of the painting process. I mean, my painting early stages is very messy.
Yeah.
So like with the Leviathan stuff, we're doing our own chapter, but I'm very all the colours. So I spray white, I don't tidy up white until all the base coat's done, because I'm going to get black on the white, I'm going to get orange on the white, I'm going to get brown on the white. So there are bits where there's visors and like a little bit of black on the side and stuff. I don't care about that because I know later on I'm going to get the white, I'm going to tidy it all up, and then I'm going to wash it, and it'll be fine. And
that's its own discussion piece, isn't it? Because it's like painting inside out, which is like the old school way.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that used to be the way to do it. Like dry brushing was done this way. Painting was done, you'd maybe paint the eyes, and then you paint the face, and then you paint the helmet, because each mistake that you made past the zone that you're on, you didn't have to fix because you were going to cover over anyway, and fixing mistakes is costly. But stuff like that there's not accepted rules anymore.
Yeah.
There's opinions coming from everywhere, like some of them from me, so I can't say it's a bad thing. But I don't think people realize at all how often things go wrong, how sloppy stuff can look before it starts looking good and stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's like anything. It's going to look messy until, like you say, the last 20%. You can really hear that rain. So atmospheric right now.
It is.
Oh yeah, wow.
Sorry, darling, the washing's getting wet. Can't do much about it.
Maybe it's not raining in Spondon.
well, I assume it is.
Contrast has changed that though as well, I think, because people are like they're starting, and then you have to paint you paint in your zone.
Yeah.
And then you paint in your zone, but that's a very, very narrow selection of skills. That doesn't include how to fix your thing. And it might be harder to fix your thing if you're like, well, I need an exact match for that.
Yeah.
Is said a lot more than it used to be. And it's people worrying about it because they've been taught a certain way, and there's now 500 GW paints. I don't know, a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
Like tons, and some contrasts that aren't even contrast, but they're being called contrast because contrasts sell better.
Yeah.
Whereas like this is a super opaque contrast. It's in an ink.
Yeah.
Or this is a really weak contrast. Is it a shade?
Yeah.
So people are coming like skeleton horde. That's a shade. I think there's a few that have exactly the properties objectively of a shade, but they're still called a contrast.
Yeah.
So people coming in down this very narrow route, and they don't know that you can make a mistake, or it's fine to make a mistake, or you can mix a color.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know what it means for the industry, but this is happening in climbing as well. Like a lot more people go climbing who've never climbed outdoors, for example.
Yeah.
And it's saying that it used to be that if you're in a room of gamers, everyone had probably done 90% of all of these hobby rites of passage. And I would imagine that ratio is flip-flopped completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what it means for the hobby, but it's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. Like things develop and change over time, and like I used to work in a climbing wall, like at one of the depots in Nottingham. And yeah, it used to be that your introduction to climbing would be doing it outside.
Yeah.
Back in day in
Safety
Yorkshire.
and consequences. And
stuff. And like people would just put hobnail boots on, which were just walking boots with nails like out the toes and stuff, and tie a rope around their waist and be like, right then, come on, let's get up this grit stone. Yeah. And it'd be fine. And it's interesting now that like people just start climbing
people
indoors.
From completely different walks of life are getting into the hobby. This applies to both climbing and to painting. Like people who would have never done it before doing it, that's brilliant and it's amazing. But these new ways have been worked out to make it more approachable.
Yeah.
But also, post, let's say you've just done contrast, or you've just done contrast and slap chop. Post that, you're further away from where you would have been if you just started painting normally, or if you'd not painted at all almost.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because when Tom was on and we talked about, well, he told us about the hobby trumpet. And getting contrasts and how it's great for your beginners. I guess, you're not making the same mistakes and learning the same way as if you were like, oh, I'm doing this yellow paint.
Clean that off and paint that zone red again. Not like, oh, well, it won't matter because I'll just do X or Y over it.
Yeah, contrast, I think, we had quite a pushback when it first came out because it was treated as a separate way of painting entirely. And I disagreed with that quite early on. So did Duncan. It's like it's an extra tool. It's not its unique own way of painting. They're great for like texture. They're great for like getting like things done quick, like faces and stuff like that. But for a beginner, when you've got like a prime example was 1,000 Sun, you have to spray it Wraithbone, then you have to neatly paint all the yellow bits. But then if you paint the blue bits where the yellow bits, that's going to go green.
There's no right way to do it, is there? Because you could do the light one first and then you can fix it, but your fix has to be perfect. Or you do this one first and then you've got to white it.
And if you make a mistake, literally is that whole section has to be redone.
With a really wet paint on a really tiny area.
Yeah, so you have to rebase coat a Wraithbone by hand,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is then streaky, so it looks different to the spray. So I was like, it's not a beginner's method. But what you're saying here with this particular model is not how I teach a beginner how to paint.
No.
Byron, Thousand Sun, very, very, very different prospects.
Yeah.
And that's not spoken about actually. I guess maybe people don't want to stop people from doing the army they're excited in, which I fully believe, do the thing that you care about. It's meant to be the ones you think are the coolest. But at the same time, if you're considering this or this equally, and this is 1,000 Suns and this is Nurgle, you should definitely start with Nurgle.
Yeah.
My God. Like, I'll start with Lumineth. That's a good first army.
But there was a way to fix the 1,000 Sun. It was a real simple way, which was spray it gold and apply blue.
Ooh, that's tasty. Yeah,
And they're like, no, you can't do it over anything that's not Wraithbone, Grey Seer, or Corax White. I was like,
then you're complicating the...
but that's... So it got quite frustrating.
I can imagine that.
And one of the things which did get dropped, thankfully, was to paint a Imperial Knight using contrast.
Yeah.
I was like, where's the silver? No, you're using grey. That's going to look shit. It's not gonna look, no one's going to spend that amount of money and paint it with these paints to have that effect.
Did it get painted?
We started. I think we did an Armiger as a test, and even that looked naff. Because you had Basilicon Grey at the time, which was the only decent grey.
Yeah.
It looked remarkably like metallic, if you can call it that. And the non-metallic gold was like Nazreg yellow. So
Yeah.
anything that was gold would use that, and anything that was grey would either use, I think maybe Space Wolves sometimes. And then
It's going to end up looking like a classical painting or something, isn't it?
it just looked flat and rubbish, for a better word. And that's why eventually it took someone outside of workshop to put some stuff on the community side that was just like a mix of everything. They went, oh, that's the way we should be using these.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, the love of God. Did drawings for him and everything.
Every time you tell me that story, I still laugh.
So yeah, it took someone else to.
The Knights are so good for... If you dry brush and wash those Knights are amazing as well. Metallics
Yeah.
and dry brushing is not something to be avoided whatsoever. It's
Yeah, because you
incredible.
did a video all about the legs, didn't you?
I did some legs. I've got a...
Which looked really, really good. Dry brush metal.
Some amazing things in this box. If only you could all see them. Ooh.
You're gonna
I'll get you some
have to
pictures.
show at some point.
I did zoom in. I'll zoom in on this camera if you
Sure.
just hold it in the
Almost
right
hold
place. No. Well, just put it somewhere and don't move it. That's a bit small.
Do you want to move it closer?
No, it's fine. I focused on it. It's fine.
Oh.
Yeah, we're all good.
Trying to
We're all
help
good.
Byron and everything.
I'll tell you what. You keep chatting, and I'll
I'll
bring
keep
it.
chatting.
Yeah, you can dry brush metallics. Specifically, metallics will go so well if you're using the right. So metallics with fine pigments. I use airbrushing ones actually.
Yeah.
Works really, really well. I only use one, and I add black to it if I want it darker. Keeps things simple, right? Or blue if I want it blue, etc. You can dry brush metallics so well.
So what was I imagine there's a video of you doing this on your
There
channel.
will be. That's been
pre-release.
That's been
Ooh.
that's been sat for forever actually. So my quest for that one was I got a good estimate how long it took heavy metal, and then I tried to do it in, I think it would have taken about 7 days, and I tried to do it in 7 hours. Was the subject of that one. You can dry brush metallic so well, and big models like the Knight.
Yeah, it's a great video though.
Oh, it's just so good. Yeah,
That's amazing.
bigger and bigger and bigger.
I love the verdigris as well. Yeah, it took. I remember Daz would do like a colour variant of a Chaos Knight, a bit smaller than those because of the old Chaos Knights. It was like a day and a half, 2 days it would take to do the colour variant. But nowadays there's like 7, 8 days, 11 for the Varangard, I think it was.
Their painters are so good these days. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like the average
That bone as well.
consistency and quality is nuts.
Mm.
It really, really is quite intimidating.
It's amazing the smoothness because it looks like you've just spent ages layering and smoothly applying highlights when we know it's not.
Buffy. Yeah.
Buffy.
And deception. There's some areas you can't hide to, and I pick that carefully. Like I can't use majority dry brushing on a space marine to try and get a box arty look.
No.
I can get a really good look, but I can't get that good. But that model, some models are just really helpful for it.
Yeah.
Metal stuff, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Metals do lend well to it. That's why I like painting all my Stormcast metal instead of having lots of colour on them.
Oh yeah. Then you get to wash them.
Yeah.
Yep.
The good
Yeah.
stuff. And a bit of dirt on there.
Because there seems, I noticed in quite a few videos of, say, especially the American YouTubers like Goobertown, Ninjon, and that kind of stuff, there seems to be a move away from using washes, and they're sort of like shading everything with
Both of
just.
them are getting really good as well. Like their painting game has upped so much.
Oh yeah, I follow
really.
like the Ninja videos, and I'm just like, oh what?
Yeah.
These
I think it's
brilliant.
just because I watch a lot of Paint Bravely with Goobers and Casey, or Brendan Casey, should I say? And it's more, I guess, talking about like same with the hobby journey. You know, it's a bit different nowadays where we've gone through like loads of like processes like White Dwarf, learning our skills slowly, whereas nowadays people can just look on the internet,
Yeah, they can
get a quick video,
get overloaded real fast,
and then instantly become professionals and tell you how to glaze or tell you how to dry brush. And
You're not glazing. You're not using a medium.
or whatever. It's
Oh
just like-
yeah, that was it. Yeah, Paul Richards.
Sure, okay.
He really should pull his finger out and learn how to glaze.
He
shouldn't
should, shouldn't he?
That's
Just like you
Doesn't
should
half let himself down.
But they were saying that, you know, there's some skills there that have been forgotten, which is like learning to, like I used to, because washes weren't a thing when I was young. Washes, I eventually made my own washes when we had matte varnish and inks, the previous Citadel stuff. So you used to get like brown ink, chestnut ink, black ink, and I used to mix. Once my matte varnish had gone down, I used to mix a bit of ink into that, and I made a wash. I used to apply it all over, and then they started to bring out things like Bad Black. I just did it because it was just like it thinned it down quite nicely. It had a matte finish, which I really like the look of. And then they eventually brought out washes, and it has sped up the painting. I've done a lot of corner cutting, but some of those early principles of like doing the base coating, doing the layering, doing the highlights, being a bit more
knowledge of dilution. But it's like so much of paint comes down to how much paint is on the brush and how wet is it.
Yeah.
And like that is a life's work there for someone, you know, like Rich or Andy or incredible painters. They're going to spend literally all of their lives trying to get to that point, which we could never even dream of. And some people are not even touching it. It's either you have it on the brush or you don't, because that's all that they've known. Yeah.
Wild.
But yeah, I think it's fine. It seems to be a move, but for a positive reason.
Yeah, or like, I guess the way I interpreted it initially was, if you want to do high-end painting, you don't use washes. But then I watched some Infernal Brush, and he was like on his heavy metal ultramarine that he did, and that tutorial sort of went crazy. And he diluted contrast paints instead, because he said he found them easier to control.
Yeah. Take Juan Hidalgo's. He's
good old Juan.
Yeah,
Love Juan.
He mainly uses contrast, doesn't he, in washes and
Got a
stuff.
whole series of videos on it, doesn't he?
Yeah,
paint
they look great.
Yeah,
with
just
contrast.
heavy contrast marines.
Dropping stuff in other things as well. Like before contrast existed, the way that I learned was dropping paints inside washes, because it made them more just basically make contrast.
Yeah.
There was something I think it was on the is it a Nemesis Dread Knight, like the baby carrier, and I watched your video, and you were dry brushing with a mix of like metallics and contrast paint or something along those lines.
I might have used them like an ink to tint the metallic.
Yeah.
Whilst putting the littlest, because it's really potent, you can put a tiny amount of something and it'll completely change your metallic. It won't change its properties, and the properties are what you're after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember watching that being like, oh, what?
Also, let's say you mix in something in your base coat, people refer to this as a mother shade or whatever. You put down a wash at first.
Yeah, I think you've talked about that previously.
You
haven't
got
you?
a brown in it, or black, or a purple, or something, and that purple stays present in the shadows until you start doing mixing. You don't get to do that, and that is just flat cheating as far as like efficiency goes and how good your end result is. If you use the same color bone or whatever in all of your highlights and use the same color in all of your shades, or a little bit of that purple is present in most of your colors, your entire piece will just look super coherent. And all it takes is for you to put an unmeasured small amount of something in something else.
Yeah.
Your painting will just look better, and you'll get away with more. Your shadows or mistakes will look less noticeable. And so it's one tiny more piece of knowledge, and then everything gets easy, but people perceive it as more complication.
Yeah.
When actually it's more forgiving by a long way as well.
Oh, wow.
By a huge margin.
So what, you mix a little bit of a purple into everything?
Let's say you, I don't know, you're doing your leather and it's a brown, dark brown, you mix a bit of your purple in there, or you even start from your modeler's purple.
Yeah.
Or, that's in the black as your base coat or anything like that. And it's just there present in the vast majority of places.
Oh,
Your
interesting.
model will just look more coherent.
Mother colour.
Yeah.
Is that, is it, I follow them on Instagram. They're insane. Are they Craft World?
Craft World
Studios,
their
yeah.
colours are gorgeous.
Yeah. Everything just looks like
Sublime.
sensational. Yeah. Really, really good. So I highly recommend anyone to follow them.
Craft World. Is that the gentleman with the really quite Very good moustache.
So yes,
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah,
That's
so
true,
husband and wife team, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I look at their stuff and I'm like,
They're really good. They got a Patreon, I think. Actually.
oh, fantastic! I'll have to check
I
it
got
out.
introduced to him by Suggs. She was like, "Have you seen these?" I was like, "No."
Yeah,
He was like, "Ooh,
He did a lion recently, which was as you'd expect.
oh, cool."
Yeah.
pardon me while I browse. Yeah.
How do you find it all? Keeping it all all the wheels turning at the same time for so many things all at once.
What's your time management like?
It must be tough.
The same as it's a struggle for everyone. Well, there's a lot of people involved in the businesses now at this stage who are better than I ever was at their particular jobs. So the senior team at Element are nuts. Like, despite the fact that Leviathan arrived on the wrong type of lorry in torrential downpour, what we can output now is incredible, and that's purely as a result of having a team who will tweak and manage things. And then it has taken a lot of beating myself up accidentally, but looking at the ways that I can make the biggest difference with the most efficient use of my effort, basically. So that's product development, tweaking things, relationships or stuff like that, and then coming in objectively to be there when the guys want to chat through something that needs fixing. That's where a lot of it goes, actually.
So you feel like, do you feel like on a day-to-day that your team are such a well-oiled machine that you are constantly having to make?
If you want to be able to make the biggest difference to stuff, really you should probably consider rendering yourself redundant to the day-to-day, I would say. Actually, it's better for your head as well, because I can be creative and I am a creative person, but if there's a lot of upkeep and admin and loads of other stuff that has to be done around that someone else could be doing better. If all I need to do is let go, they should be doing that and I should be doing this.
Yeah.
How hard did you find letting go?
Hard. Definitely really, really hard. Like, bit by bit it takes it, but the easiest thing is just looking at someone who's better than I could ever be at the vast majority of the parts of the things that used to be my responsibility, and just knowing that they're smashing it.
Yeah.
I kind of...
Have you got plans?
Yeah, absolutely. They've gone really well, actually. There's been a really good response to them. And I think there is a bit of a resurgence of high street stuff in general going on now.
Do you get any push or grumblings or anything with the fact that, like, if we take example for Nottingham, you are about a 3.5 minute walk away from Games Workshop store? How does that sit within it all? Is that okay?
So we spoke to them. They're really open and friendly about it. And the thing is, if you look at what is the best place to put something, unless it's London, which is massive, if you look at the best place to put something, you only have a few options in little UK towns generally. And the moment you prioritise bus route, public transport, if you get a map, you basically end up with like 4 streets. So it's almost impossible to avoid anyway. And I would not be surprised if more stores of a certain type popping up in an area just grows it as a whole anyway. Like when you see these outlet villages or whatever, and there's seven outdoor clothing shops in a row. They all seem to be doing fine. I think there's definitely, if somewhere is more of a destination for one reason, I think people end up building the list of things they could visit that help them getting a bus into town or whatever for the first time. So we've not had any kickback from it, no. And so much of what we shift is, it's unbelievable how much paint sells from there. Well, it's not, because of your reaction to oh my god. There's a big world out there of alternate hobby products now that I think is a huge part of it.
Pigments as well now. Ooh.
Still
get my head around those. They're interesting.
There's so many things that using. I remember years ago seeing someone use
Forge World style.
Like on it was on an ogre, and he was using pink on flesh to do the shading.
Oh.
And pink and brown. I remember thinking, oh my god, that's nuts. But it's just half this stuff is just military techniques. And oh my god, it's brand new. It's not. It's like 70 years old. And it involves something that has been made by the same company for all of that time period. Do
you think that the painting in the miniature community is almost quite insular?
Completely.
Yeah.
Because it's people who aren't artistic. For a lot of it. So you end up with people who haven't come in, like Craft World did come via fine art, you can tell, right? People haven't taken that route to get here, but also Games Workshop and Edge highlighting. think a lot of things go together. So like if something needs to be instantly appreciable from 3 inches, 3 feet and 6 feet away, it look great in any lighting on any table color. And for someone who's never liked art in their life to go, that looks good.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to do certain things. So I think all of it kind of, it feeds into the same thing. Now you do have, you know, the world of proper fancy painting is growing and growing and growing massively. So there are more influences coming from outside, but you've still got the same people in general coming in. And maybe they're people who've never, you know, done a drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to work with a load of people in the oil painting team that had never. I mean, I went to art college, went to university.
Yeah.
They never did that, but they've learnt from copying and seeing what other people have done, and you know, learning from their mistakes. I mean, Duncan did archaeology,
Sure.
so he was like, that's what he wanted to do. Then he walked into the shop and had no artistic preference. He just liked painting toy soldiers, and he now runs his own company selling paints and making paints and all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah.
So you know, it doesn't matter what your background is if you're into it.
You just get in and start obsessing, don't you?
Yeah. Because I guess the GW way of painting is quite a mechanical format to get non-painters to paint models.
It's like photography. It's for box packaging.
Yeah.
It's to look nice.
Yeah.
It's to look good.
When it works with their paints.
Yes, yeah.
Like
absolutely.
it works, their style works particularly well because the satin paint will, if it's a backpack or something, the satin paint will reflect off it nicely, but then you'll also have a nice edge.
Yeah.
Whereas if that was a matte paint, you this is why the display painters are using ultra matte varnish so well. Your model is exactly how you paint it, and those NMM highlights are exactly where you put them.
Yeah.
And if there is a mistake, it's your fault, and if it's excellent, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Not, you know, this light that's shining on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like satin paints rounded, they do look great as well. You put a space marine anywhere,
Yes.
and it's just going to shine according to the room.
Because I've seen, even to a certain extent, on like you go on the website and you have the 360 ones, and you're like, oh, that looks awesome. I wonder how they've done that. And you drag the 360, and then you're like, oh, it's the reflections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that many times when I've done like, a great example on live. Rob Symes was doing a battle report with me. I was playing with my Stormcast Cities of Sigma stuff, and I had a steam tank which I painted gold because I was just going full on. Everything's gold and silver. So I did this steam tank. It was just a big block of gold, some colours on there. I had some crew because I'd been inspired by Band of Brothers. So I was like an archer pointing like, it's there beyond the hay bales, sir. He's like, I can't bloody see it. I can't bloody shoot it. So I've got like that like little scene from Band of Brothers going on top of this steam tank. But it's gold. It's just like sprayed Retributor armour, washed. And then as soon as it's on this 360, it looks like the most amazing. So many people commented, how did you do that gold? I was like, I sprayed it and I washed it. I dry brushed it. No, that's not right. You've done all these blends. You've done all this like layer. And I was like, I really haven't.
My reflective paint is shiny. It's looking great.
It looks amazing.
That's underused, actually. I think there's a really big difference between inspiration and intimidation. And especially with Instagram these days, people confusing the two. But also people are doing things for photos that aren't necessarily relevant for a typical painter's models in person on a table. And the obsession, there's nothing wrong with matte paints. They're great. And if you are trying to control exactly where this goes, they're better than a satin paint. Doesn't make satin paints bad. But there's definitely this leaning towards like matte is good. And, you know, looking at things at a tiny level and really caring about that. And people are kind of ignoring like the finish of a model as a thing because it should be matte because that's what good people use. Which is stupid, and also repetition. Like repetition it's been completely forgotten as a skill, and it is a skill. Like that's a tree, that's a forest. Yeah, that tree didn't get better, but it looks better, right? And that's the same with completely average, consistent painting times by 20 for 20 dudes.
Well, that's when I bought my son Dark Imperium, and it was Death Guard and it was Space Marines, and then I realised after painting a couple of Death Guards, I thought these are going to soak up a lot of time, and I've also got to paint the good guys as well. That I went to myself, they're going to be silver because it will take so much of the highlighting off them. I highlight the characters to some degree, they come up a bit, but the rank and file they're not getting. I'm just going to spray paint them lead belcher and stick stuff on them, and that'll. Because I just haven't got the time to paint two armies at once, and you have to, whether you want to, apply more time to Death Guard when they're covered in teeth and tentacles, where you usually don't have to do that with the standard.
There used to be flat colours everywhere. Like I mentioned my first White Dwarf. In that, there's multiple Space Marine armies that are literally 3 colours and based. And in a photo on a scenery, they just look great. look absolutely fine because they've still got nice shapes.
Yeah.
And it's still cool models. So you could do that and then wash it, and that would be completely fine. But I do think that there's this vast like inner contradiction within the industry at the moment, which is like contrast or display and then nothing in between.
Yeah.
There's the unnecessary levels of judgmentalness that don't need to be there.
Well, that makes my thing better if I say your thing's worse. That's how being a geek works, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's sad, isn't it?
Yeah. Not bad.
I'll enjoy mine more if I say that you're enjoying yours wrong. So
And the thing is we're in such a niche thing. We all should be
So
doing the
sad,
opposite,
isn't it?
which is getting further together instead of
Yeah.
just trying to push ourselves apart.
people are so nice as well. You go to shows and everyone is lovely, right? Like UK Games Expo, you just meet everyone and everyone is just a really, really, really nice person.
So you wonder where all the idiots come from.
Keyboards.
Maybe when they go home, they're still like Jekyll and Hyde. No.
No, yeah.
Gone like, oh, you do the way you dry brush, and that's amazing. And go, I hate dry brushing.
Yeah. Pete the Wargamer, your conversion's rubbish. No, I'm sure he
Isn't
doesn't.
Pete lovely?
Yeah,
He's so nice, isn't he?
Yeah.
So younger than I expected.
Yeah, I remember the first
I don't
time.
know why I was
He's
what I
got that,
expected him to
he's
look
got
like.
that mature orator's voice, hasn't
Yeah,
he?
Yeah,
he's
no,
got
that's
that.
right,
He's got that soothing baritone.
He's telling me facts. What is he
Yeah.
saying? It doesn't matter, it's facts.
Yeah. If you say
yeah,
it
so-
smoothly, calmly, and deeply.
There's a few of them that've got
Yeah.
really great voices. I always think Pete sounds like in another life he would curate a museum somewhere.
Absolutely.
He's got that sort of voice, doesn't he?
Telling you about history or something. Him and Henry from Henry.
Oh, yeah.
Henry's
is
like the slightly theatrical version, and then Pete's
Yeah.
like the
But
slightly more
Henry's
BBC
just the
version.
nicest start to any video, isn't it? Hello, Henry here.
Yeah,
Here you
yeah.
go.
Yeah, I'd love
Cup of tea.
I'd love to get Henry on here and just get him to start. Or would be
Hello,
like,
everyone.
yeah, or just be like, hey, it's Peachy, it's Pat, it's Jeff. Hi guys, Henry here. Yeah.
We've got a few. We like Pete. We like Henry. We like Balthasar Gold from the Painting Coach.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, I think the thing I pick up on is, I guess, in the videos that are like only hands, you concentrate on the voice like a lot more, and the tics that people have and the way they say things and all that sort of stuff. Like after Richard mentioned it, he did where his wife.
I love that. I watched that
did a
over and
video
over.
and she got all of his tics down and those like those exasperated noises that he makes and he's like, oh, I can't remember
wanted to
anything.
do this, but I didn't care. And then I spent far too long here, so you probably want to do it like this.
Yeah. And it was amazing. And I found myself like, I was just like drifting off to sleep because like, it was so good.
Did a great job.
We have some Patreon questions.
Sure.
If that is okay.
It's a very cheeky question.
That's what I'll see if I can find it. But Clarky asks, as he got in there with first, so I'll definitely read out his question. What are your key tips for brush care? I've always been tentative about getting expensive, in quotation marks, brushes, anything that isn't £1 from Hobbycraft, as I'm worried
Oh, Jesus.
I'll forget to clean it and it'll be ruined.
Oh dear. Well, number one, obviously those brushes are probably worth as much as you spent on them, but
Yeah.
safely in the knowledge that they are, use a bigger brush. So like this, volume is resilience, and I think this is where all discussions about brushes for typical painting should begin, because it's like a pizza. If I offer you a 9-inch or a 12-inch pizza, one's 3 inches bigger, but it's double the volume. Every time, and we won't get a 9-inch pizza. So every time the brush gets bigger, it's getting like 200% more resilient. So the difference between like a 1 and a 3 is like 400% volume, which is also its life expectancy, how much abuse it can take, etc., etc., etc. So size is the best place to start, and just get one really good one, and do look after it. And anything that you think, I'll just leave it in there in that paint pot. If there's the word "just" involved, no.
Can I just add, that was the great, because I've been a bit of a brush abuser. I don't know. I'd always make sure they went in a pot, but they went in, that way. And when I bought my first set from you, the box instantly makes you behave better.
There's a negative shape there. Put it in its house.
Yeah, it really is ridiculously that simple. That you go, oh, that just makes me behave better because it has a place to be.
Yeah,
and I think it's absolutely right. It's just you just something feeling special creates your ability to be special in how you look after it.
Yeah, a place for everything in its place. Just pop it in its house. Use a big one, and they will. If things go wrong as well, you can it's a natural product. You can bring it back to life. So shampoo will work, our brush soap will work. You can do quite a lot to revitalize something. A big one is best.
Excellent. Lesson says your tutorials are fantastic. So firstly, just wanted to say a big thank you. My biggest problem with dry brushing has been the chalkiness, and as I improve, this has made the process much more enjoyable. On to the question. I like to believe that secretly off camera you detest dry brushing and can't stand the sight of it. Can you confirm?
No, I can't. I really like it. I love it, and I still discover stuff about it, like shockingly regularly. Actually, I will have big realizations about how it works and how I can improve it. I do like combining it more than we do on the channel. And that is the fault of nerds, because if I use anything else that isn't a dry brush, they'll say it's because of the airbrushing that's involved or whatever. But I think hopefully we've built up enough faith now that, because we used to have to belabor the point a bit, especially when it was more new as a concept, or as a widely known concept. Like, I didn't invent it. In fact, if you want to see who the forefather was, there's an artist called Bohan. Don't know if any of you know of him.
No.
He's worth checking out. It's incredible. He's not so active these days, but he's been amazing for like 2 decades. But yeah, I do like combining it more than we do. But when we started out, just to make sure people knew it definitely was the dry brushing, hence 100% dry brush great unclean one or whatever, we just did that because then there was no room for people thinking that it was the space of the wash or the airbrush that had a part of it. And actually, if you combine techniques, they will all teach you about dry brushing, and dry brushing will teach you all about them. Like, airbrush technique and dry brush technique are really similar as far as like lighting or angle or positioning goes. You use an airbrush a lot more like a dry brush than you do like a painty brush. So
Oh, that's really cool. Scott asks a simple question. He says, when selecting an undercoat, do you choose a lighter undercoat or lighter colours and a darker undercoat for richer ones, or do you mix and match depending on the final result you desire?
Oh dear, I'm not going to give a simple answer to this. That's a good question. So generally I work from Chaos Black because of its properties. We just discussed that earlier. It's great. I'll still do that and then put something else over the top of it. If you're wanting to affect an area really fast, really efficiently, then maybe start with a grey or something like we discussed. If you're about to do a beige cloth or something like that. But generally my painting goes from deep, dark and cool up to lighter and warmer. That's a pretty consistent theme in my dry brushing, actually. So even great unclean one down here, he started off like blue purple and he ended up lime green.
Let's show him off.
This is the one from the channel where people think we fuzzed out his head.
He's working for you anonymously.
You need some googly eyes on there,
right? There's some old videos, and now at this point, I think about 10% of the comments are, "Why have you fuzzed out his head?"
That's brilliant.
He's not in witness protection. But again, I just mentioned airbrushing. So from the bottom, he's purple bottom, and from the top, he's pretty light green. And then you got that. That's airbrushing tech just applied entirely to dry brushing. But deep, dark, cool base, and then it's gone up to a much lighter, warmer one, and then you get a transition in the warmth of the color as well as the depth of the color. So that's kind of my default. Something that's really useful is like heavy overbrushing. So if you want dark recesses because you don't want light shadows because they look bad, and you're not going to contrast it or something, a heavy overbrush, which is dry brushing but with more paint on it, and you do it quite a large area, like the start of slap chop, I guess. That's a brilliant technique. It's just so underused. As is base coating by hand, actually, with a dry brush. By just a huge area you can get done in no time.
It's very smooth as well.
I've
really always found that.
Because I've struggled in the past with trying to apply smooth base coats onto like Space Marines and stuff like that. And struggled quite a lot.
It's a hard one. That's why airbrushes are great, because it's a task where you can only be rewarded up to like your minimum acceptable quality for how much time you put in. You're like, oh, put in tons of time on that. Cool, that's acceptable, let's go. You're not going to make it better or go above, you know, an airbrushing or finding an efficient way to dry brush or smush your base coat's great for that.
Cool. Martin asks, any plans to bring back Facehammer as a podcast or online show? I understand it won't be the same, but I miss that kind of commentary in the AOS scene.
So that was the podcast. So I've not played AOS for a while. We used to have 4 of us. Terry stopped playing continued painting. Les joined the Army Painters team at GW, actually, Les Martin. And then there was myself and Russ left, and we haven't played as much AOS recently. I've not played AOS for a while, actually. Did one tournament in the last year. We might do. Russ and I have been chatting, and Russ is really good at producing armies as well. Paints quite a lot like me, so we might come back with some stuff that's a bit more how to get a tournament army on the table, which is that's my roots, actually.
Old World's around the corner, isn't it? So
Les mentioned a tournament, actually. I would go to an event with those guys, and that was specifically his question was, there isn't going to be an event at some point, would you guys come to this?
Yeah.
And I absolutely would.
Yeah.
I like that aesthetic as well. I really do.
Been swatting up on Total War 3 and getting ideas for Old World.
That's where Pete gets loads of his ideas from Total War, doesn't he? Like when he does like a crazy crab necropolis thing or whatever. Like, I've been playing a computer game and here's a crazy thing.
Right, struggling for anything that's not cheese related.
No.
It's got to be asked at some point in time, I would imagine.
No. We've got a bunch of questions from Micah. I'll read out one of them that just says, "Can I have a job?"
What are your skills, Micah?
Do you like woodwork? If you live close to Stockport, we are always open to CVs. Our team's growing fast, actually.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
and that's for
a fair answer.
AO. Yeah. Woodwork at Element Games. Build this shelf. No. Okay. Wonderful. We've talked about synthetic. Well, what are your thoughts on synthetic sable? Is it there yet?
Not quite, but it is by far the best it's ever been.
Yeah,
it really is. I think the growth of the industry, like you need the last one that came out about product design was really interesting because you need demand and you need money to make stuff happen. And our industry is tiny. It's big how we think about it, but the growth of our industry and the need for really good brushes at a small scale, which basically just barely exists anywhere else, because it just doesn't matter as much for watercolors or something, even though they use the same brushes. Our industry growing should have enough clout to at least increase the speed at which the development happens. You just have to have a huge amount of money behind it, though.
Yes, I can imagine. I remember walking into Hobbycraft shortly after I'd started painting and like painting phase was starting to happen, and I was just like, oh my god, all the brushes are huge. Like, it's
like size 6, which to us seems like that's literally the biggest brush in our range is a 6. That's a standard brush. Now we have been closely following it and trying out a lot of stuff, and there's some that are really good, but at the same time we're just very aware that someone's going to buy a brush and it isn't going to be a Kalinsky brush, and that's noticeable if you've used one. So would you so you'd prefer to wait until it's similar and then start doing it? I'm using some at home which are the best they've ever been, and they are really, really close. Yeah. But they're not exactly the same.
No. Yeah. So you'd be reluctant to do it until they were,
as close as they can get, basically.
Very good. Barton asks, are there any other techniques that you've been meaning to try with respect to dry brushing?
People have asked me about oils, actually. And from what I understand, which is fairly limited, using oils is really, really similar to how I'm already doing it.
Oh, right.
You can stipple things off and the paint stays workable for longer. And my way of doing the same thing is just to work incredibly fast. You'll know this. So the quicker you work, the less time your paints have to dry, the more you can get away with. And it just encourages you to do things fast anyway, which I kind of need to do as a matter of necessity anyway. But oils do that, but without the rush, because they've just slowed themselves down. I would love to try oils, but I'd be starting at like absolute ground zero.
Slight change in topic, only ever so slightly. Joe asks, what's your favourite Pokemon?
Jigglypuff.
Is that going to be the new cheese?
Yeah, maybe.
They've adopted it for me for my bananas. I'll just go with Pikachu. It's unimaginative, but it was obviously the best.
Yeah.
See, I don't know enough about Pokemon other than Jigglypuff.
Did you see the Pikachu? Someone did the squig.
Oh, I did.
Oh, wasn't it
it's
awesome?
Good as well.
And the fact that he's put a baseball cap on the Orc as well. It's amazing.
Have you guys actually ever seen? I probably mentioned before the Toy Story 40K.
Yes.
So good.
Someone the other day did a load of Orc trucks, and they did one of them as the green sports car. Then the other one that they did next to it, which was amazing, they did an Orc truck that was designed to look like the whatever they were called, the gang in the most recent Mad Max movie.
Oh wow!
You know the ones where they're all
is the painter Orc Butt.
Yeah, and they're all the orcs are all really, really pale. You know, like the way they wear, and you know, and the silver bits on their faces and that, and they've done that with like, done to look like that. It was fantastic.
There's a certain, if you buy a VW bug at a certain scale, it's exactly right to fit on the chassis.
Yes.
It's a like a known specific, and they used to be too big, but as things have got bigger, it now works. It wouldn't have on an old orc one, but it does on a new orc one, and now you can just buy it, get rid of everything that isn't the shell, do whatever you like to the shell, and it looks brilliant. It looks really good. I'll find you a picture afterwards. It looks amazing.
Absolutely.
I've seen the orc vehicles look fantastic. Yeah, they're really, really good. And somebody did the Leagues of Votan to look like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes,
that was
all
good.
this stuff. Yeah.
Someone has asked, you can refuse to answer it, what is your best-selling brush?
Well, so it used to be, and probably still is, one of the small ones, so a 0. And I think that is people's default detail size, but also it's smaller, so it's less resilient. We do have a completely different buying pattern online to in shows, though. It literally goes from 0 to 3, like a complete flip-flop. Because in person, people are handed the bigger brush to start with. Yeah. Because otherwise they'll go and they'll pick a tiny little thing, you know, like a psycho brush or an insane detail, or you know, whatever the standard naming protocols are for them. Pointless brush.
I agree. I've never used mine.
Like soon to be dead brush if you're using heavy paints on it, and every paint is heavy these days. So yeah, people are handed the biggest brush that is still reasonable, which is a 3 at a show, and then from there they'll go and look at others, and normally the response is like, oh, that's the point, still got a good point, exactly right. The business end is still the business end.
Fantastic. Someone has asked, when are you going to start doing dry brushing classes at Adepticon? I think you already do, right?
Well, no, I don't. I'm really glad someone's asked that, actually. So we are seriously looking into classes in the future, and this is something that we're next year it'll probably be next year that you'd see the first ones. But if people would be interested in that, please keep asking us, because it's going to be hard work to make it happen. Seeing it on repeat would definitely make that more likely to happen. We'll probably try some out in the UK, but we're lacking in shows, sadly. And so it's actually more likely that the first time it happens, it would be in the States. Even though logistically that's a bit more work. But we would love to do it in person, and in person is special. And also me and Pete, oddly, have been doing some private classes, group ones, to practice. So we are getting more experienced.
Oh, that's interesting. Dan asks, if I had £100,000 to open a hobby shop, how long would it be before I was out of business?
That tuned very soon.
I think he might be he's buying his own stock. I think he's building his own stock. I think he might be.
If he's going by the industry standard, somewhere between 9 and 18 months, or VAT registration. VAT registration is like quite a big hurdle to get over initially, I think, isn't it? For people, especially in the UK.
20% of your turnover just goes bloop. Gone. Okay. Someone that we might know, Pete the Wargamer, asks, what is your favourite type of brush, and why is it the flat dry brush?
I told you.
We love you, Pete. He's so cheeky, isn't he? I don't know what to say to that. I can't say anything nasty about him. He's too nice. Then you meet him in person, he's even nicer.
Well, he's got a dark streak after asking that question.
I'll say something nasty for everyone. How dare you, Pete?
I'll repay him more than he's due by saying you should keep your eyes on his stuff for a possible product release at some point in the future.
It's exciting.
It's cool. It's cool.
I don't know if I know about it.
I'll tell you.
I don't think he's got.
Well, he released some stuff out to the public, didn't he?
I think so.
Maybe a little bit of merch, but this is stuff.
Oh, I've seen heads on hooks.
Oh, yeah, might be that.
And okay, next question. If you could dry brush any biscuit, which would you choose?
A hobnob, because it wouldn't fall apart.
Nice.
It's got a lot of texture to it.
Got a lot of texture to it.
Oh, here we go. Which obligatory favourite cheese question?
Used to be Manchego. A decade ago it was Manchego. Or anything really strong.
Yeah.
Have you given it up?
I've not eaten cheese for 11 years.
Wow.
Oh wow. Interesting. Yeah.
Just bananas. That's it.
Just bananas.
Yeah.
Just lives on bananas.
Colin the cat's
Yeah.
Colin the
That's
cat's
it. We buy all these sweets, but like opening the packets like on the show would be just so loud.
Yeah.
Right pain in the backside. Love the paintbrushes. I have a set of S and D. Your method of dry brushing has inspired me how I can paint my Leviathan set. What inspired your painting style?
If I summarized it as a journey, it was dipping, which probably needs explaining these days actually, which is where you basically got like fence varnish. You put it, sounds crazy, doesn't it? But you put it all over your model, having painted the model slightly lighter than you wanted it to end up being. So if you were to paint the entire thing with Devil and Mud, I guess that's an all right comparison. So I did that, worked out that was efficient, worked out it was restrictive and things went a bit brown. Then I started highlighting it over that to counter the brown. And then the washes came out, the shades. And I started mixing paints into those, basically to make my own contrast. And that's where I did do everything turquoise.
Turquoise phase.
Yeah, mine was a long turquoise phase. So that's where, this is actually one of the earliest things I dry brushed at a high standard. That's where my army ended up coming out. So that's me making my own custom washes, actually.
That's lovely.
Awesome.
It's really nice.
Cool pieces. Tiger butt.
Yeah, tiger butt.
How to hide mistakes.
I love this model. I've got
so
one myself.
good, right?
And I didn't realise I went quite bright with it and it ended up looking like She-Ra's Pegasus. I was like, okay, it's fine. it's just quite bright, but this.
Nothing wrong with that.
Oh no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it wasn't the
wasn't the game plan when you started.
Not at all.
So that was I'll give you the rear view because it's actually the best view.
Oh.
You also get his shield, which has got a wolf on it. But yeah, that informed a lot of my painting, was painting feathers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome.
Bone at the front as well.
It's lovely.
Okay. How long do your dry brushes normally last? It takes me about 3 evenings of intensive painting to change the nice U shape of one of my D series, the small one, into a V shape. Does that mean I'm doing something wrong?
Too much water, too much paint. Yeah. So it's the water. There's too much water being involved, or too much paint, or slightly too much of both, and possibly should be using a larger brush. The rules that stand for normal brushes, using the biggest one you can, apply for all brushes. Like basically, if you can reach the area that you need to reach and do what you need to do, then the brush is fine. You don't step down a brush because you need to do like a a smaller detail or something like that. 2,000 points is what I expect to get out of a brush.
Yeah.
Minimum.
Interesting.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Gunwitch just says dry brushing is not a crime! Exclamation mark.
Hopefully not. I'm going to check.
There's your next match for your t-shirt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we need to keep that one. Yeah. Has Peachy pegged you yet, my cast?
He did.
We did,
once.
Yeah.
In public.
Yeah.
With an audience.
Probably without consent as well.
No, probably.
He's quite gentle though.
That doesn't make it okay. How do you clean a dry brush, and how do I get it dry enough to paint again? Mine sometimes get too wet, other times too dry.
Don't clean it like that. Don't submerge it in water. So use the washboard on some type of surface that is textured, that could be your model, a little bit of moisture and some soap, and you basically do exactly the same thing as dry brushing, because dry brushing is taking a little bit of moisture and removing paint according to texture from your brush. I just described cleaning your brush. They're both the same thing. So act as if you're dry brushing an area and use that as a way to start.
Yeah.
I now hold that sheet in my hand religiously, even though I think I know exactly what you've written on it. Every time I go to wash it, I go, where's the piece of paper? That's something I've always done. Never really like going, oh yeah, that's how you do it with the wet paint. You just work it until it's dry and go over, and that's how I've always, like that piece of wood, or even like the cutting mats. I used to use the cutting mats a lot. They end up having loads of texture.
Yeah,
on them.
completely.
They were great. Terrible when managers came along going, what the hell's going on with your cutting mat?
The best thing is to not put as much. It's like an engine. Just don't put as much mileage through it. So less paint on, less paint off. That type of stuff. It'll all abuse your brush slightly less. And if you don't ever soak paint down into the middle, then you don't ever need to try and get water down into the middle to remove the paint, which is it's always kind of a losing battle, really.
L. Smith coming in with the serious questions. Do you ever just go and hide in the shelves and stuff at Element?
I would.
Going and doing that is why my cupboard of shame is just. My cupboard of shame is so extreme now that it is separated by Grand Alliance. It had to have order. So, literally, there's 4 shelves and it's separated by Grand Alliance.
Amazing.
That's overflow.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Statement from Stephen. I bought a set of your brushes and they're great. Sadly, they did not come with a bucket of talent.
Oh,
Adam Langford.
that one.
Which Artis Opus brush do you recommend for brushing your teeth?
New range.
We should have mentioned at the beginning that our patrons can be a little bit left field.
That's absolutely fine. That's fine. So when we come out with a weathering brush, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be the one.
Say left field. I
fantastic.
think they're in the other field.
Yeah,
God's
you
so
might be.
left.
Well, we've got. I mean, this one potentially even further. When choosing your favourite trees, which brush do you use? So
Extra large D by
yeah.
default.
Yeah, why not? Oh, they go. Someone said, as a retailer in the UK, you might not have any insight, but do you have any idea why the US version of Leviathan is almost 80 quid more than it is in the UK? I'm currently going through immigration and I've been holding off on large purchases, but the price difference is daft.
No currencies, complications. At least you're not Australian, mate.
Yeah, they're
It's
really
ridiculous,
shafted, aren't
isn't
they?
it?
I've heard so
Yeah.
much from the poor Australians.
And
New
also as
Zealanders,
well,
of course.
to some degree as well, it will all. Some of it will be reflected in the wages that are being paid out to people who handle things along the way as well.
Well, if you look at other countries though, like so when I did the ETC, so the European Team Championship, playing Warhammer, some of the countries there, if you looked at the price, I think we used a Lord of Change as a metric at the time. It was in months of wages that you could look at.
Oh, wow.
As well. I mean, as soon as you go to like Eastern Europe or something like that,
Yeah.
you really have to put things in perspective, and that's one of the reasons why there's such. People asked, why do you lock lists in so early? It's so people can practice with lists, but also so something new doesn't come out that people have to like spend 4 months worth of wages on buying 2 of in order to be able to compete at an international level. So yeah, there's people who've got it even worse than Australians.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
Yeah.
Not a cheap hobby.
No, not at all. I remember reading about shipping that apparently, like perhaps pre-COVID, that shipping to China was so cheap and economical that it was cheaper for Scottish salmon farmers to ferry the salmon off to China to have them all filleted and cut up into something
Just in
edible.
beds of ice.
Yeah, and then ship it back, than have it done in Scotland, like just down the road.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Shipping
That's
containers are about
absolutely-
4 times what they were as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is absolutely wild. Matt asks, how do you achieve such buttery smooth dry brushing? I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos, but I can't seem to achieve the smooth result.
Use a bigger brush, use satin paints, stipple, put less paint on, take less paint off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Your videos show how versatile a dry brush can be, even for jobs lots of people would use an airbrush for. Are there things you would still favour an airbrush for?
Putting a base coat in a really 3-dimensional model.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can still use your dry brush at angles, but if you're like trying to suggest lighting or something, or hit a model from a particular aspect, that is more complicated to do. Using the airbrush as like a stencil and then following what the airbrush did is a brilliant thing to do, actually. And people
cool.
should do more, and we will be doing more on the channel, actually.
Yeah.
I've arbitrarily picked 100k for when we'll start mixing techniques up, so when that happens, gloves are off. Efficiency mode, the Trinity is coming up.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Wonderful. Those are all of the questions that I feel comfortable reading out.
With some dark ones. Don't have to.
Is that after hours?
Yeah, there was an after hours one. We'll maybe.
That's fair. Yeah, weirdly, sometimes a few people have said to me, where do you highlight a model? How do you go about highlighting? I often say if you do like a little bit of a dry brush over it, it gives you some perfect places where you need to
completely.
add the, so personally, I'd keep it to the dry brush and maybe add a little bit of a highlight here and there, but it does help tell you.
You can work your steps out between it and have the colours that work well in that method. You can do so much with like blob down a wash, recess is covered.
Yeah.
dry brush, raised areas covered, and then just one single manual,
Yeah.
you know, bit here or there. Or on metallics, that's often where you get those wins, and you're like, why did that work? And it's because you put the last bit in the right place.
Yeah. With the gold, I tend to find that I've like retributed armor. I do my wash because with my Stormcast, I tend to use Griff Charger Grey, which is like a bit of a tealy kind of dark tealy wash, and then I just use auric armor, and I don't fully layer everything. I just like pick out some of the top points, and it just makes the gold look amazing. It's really, really good. Top tip for
it's like cartoon drawing. They only use like 4 colours to suggest, you know, whatever without metallic paint. So
yeah,
it's very doable. Yeah.
Well, I think
Awesome.
we are done, aren't we?
I think we're approaching the end.
Thank you so much for. I mean, obviously you've got plenty more in there. Lots of little. What is that? Like little Tyranid back butts. Little Tyranid butts. Got some Tyranid butts.
Oh yeah, this is the most recent one.
Oh yeah.
Just hand people around.
That's
This
a really
is-
nice little bit of effect on there as well.
This is cheaty.
cheaty.
So
That's so vibrant.
Shots of these.
right.
Oh,
So
that's
the,
ridiculous.
so the
I want
banana-
to start Tyranids now.
so the banana's traditional. Like I'm
Byron.
talking about highlighting here. So the banana has been contrasted in my favourite way, which is contrast, shade, shade.
Yeah.
So you deepen it and you do everything slightly slower, but it turns out lots better. Then that's been highlighted traditionally. The one that we've got over there and here, we've highlighted once, and then we've just repeated our contrast in certain areas of the highlight, which is like the shaded areas. And basically your highlight ends up having variation in it, even though it's one colour. This is huge. This is something I'm going to be pushing the living shit out of on the channel for a long time, because I think this
Is the episode for that's up, isn't it?
tonight actually, yeah. So this is, I think, if people have just contrasted and they're like, I've kind of got this, I want to push a bit more, I think this is where people should be going next.
Yeah.
Really unintimidating. You use a single other colour, like a pastel, whatever, and then you just repeat stuff you've already done.
Yeah, yeah. It's how I do faces, weirdly. I tend to have a go-to for my Necromunda, which is I use Rakkar flesh, and then shade it with Gulliman flesh, a couple of thin coats of it, build it up, relayer the raised bits with Rakkar again, re-coat that Gulliman, and then just use a final highlight of Rakkar for 2 colours.
Repetition is so efficient, and people view steps as complexity in time when actually being neat is complexity in time. It's completely...
So that's only highlighted once with one colour?
So on that one, what I've done is I contrasted turquoisey in the dark bit, and then I added a little bit of Imperial Fist to green, and just did it on the end bits. But at no point did I like feather or anything like that. I just went blob and blob, and because it's contrast and it's not opaque, it looks like I've actually used skill. And I didn't.
Actually,
That's the best way.
Which is the aim. Yeah,
which in itself is a skill.
It is. My skill's knowing where I can get away without using any.
Which is a big skill, because
fantastic.
I get this with like my one-to-ones and like just like through like conversations I've had with people, and they're like, you know, I often call it cheating, and you know, I cut corners and this, that, and the other, and people say, no, it's not cutting corners. Cutting corners is like making you deliberately, you're leaving things wrong. It's efficiencies and stuff, but it is a skill set where you're like, how do I get a really cool effect with minimal effort, so I've got more time to do other cool things. It's a good skill, and it's good that you're out there doing these.
Repeating steps 7 times.
It's good. Yeah, I mean, you know, having the channel, obviously the 2 businesses you run. I guess Artis Opus is part of Element, or is it a separate?
No, separate.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to put my foot in it.
They're 12 minutes apart though, so geographically.
Do you live in the middle?
I live enough drive away that if I've had a bad day, I'm kind of forgotten about it by the time I get home, which is the right distance.
Yeah, that sounds
25
good.
minutes, exactly right.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. Anything else you want to cover before we shoot?
Tonight,
yeah, but White Dwarf.
Oh, I did have one. It's outside though. I think that's... People should stop holding themselves to unrealistic standards in their painting and be really happy to get one thing to acceptable and then times it by 5. This is something that's going to be making like a really firm appearance on their channel now and forever, which is like, we're trying to boil down to what matters and to teach people why we've done things more. Like more and more and more, we're leaning on education, and we'd really, really like to help people get to whatever their goal is in the amount of minis, whether that's like a battle force or a warband or whatever. We'd like to help people get there. So we will be doing in-person classes as well, but on the channel you'll see a lot of like really heavy leaning on simplicity and efficiency, but learning a little bit while we're doing it.
Brilliant.
If people aren't subbed, please sub.
Yeah.
Check out the brushes, they're good. Check out the shops, they're great.
Yeah.
It's all true.
And anyone who's bought any of it, thanks very much. We'll carry on doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
And thanks for all the lessons in dry brushing.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah, can I have one?